development. I kindly invite the moderator and the high-level panelists to the stage. Panel will be followed by a short coffee break outside the conference room. Please enjoy.
Does this work? Yes. Okay. Thank you. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this high-level panel on natural resources as potential for sustainable development. Africa's significant natural resources, as we just heard the minister, provide an opportunity to leverage the continent's strategic position in the global digital and green energy transition. Resource-based industrialization in Africa has the potential to stimulate economic diversification, create employment opportunities, and foster environmental sustainability. And there are, however, obstacles and inherent risks involved, from illicit, unsustainable, and unethical exploitation of natural resources, environmental, social, and human rights concern, to lack of regulatory framework, technology, social, and human rights concern, questionable practices by some foreign companies and multinational corporations, as well as implications for peace and security. And of course, the current global geopolitical, geostrategic constellation adds a layer of uncertainty and unpredictability. African countries, I'm sure we'll hear today, have taken a number of actions to improve their mining and investment policies, laws and regulations, and develop capacity to process and refine resources locally. There have been many international and regional, including African initiatives, to set standards for responsible sourcing, supply chain transparency, and sustainable business practices. With 80 to 100% import dependency on many critical raw materials, there is a need for the European Union to secure supply chains, diversify partnerships, and accelerate circular economy. The aim of this panel is to explore how Africa-EU partnership can enhance the opportunities for inclusive, equitable, sustainable, and responsible management of Africa's natural resources across value chains that drives economic growth, creates green jobs, and reduces poverty and inequality while minimizing the negative environmental and social impacts. And we will also look into the role of regional cooperation and economic integration in these processes. So I have a fantastic panel here, which will highlight a vision of two resource-rich countries with very different experiences. We use from the government and the private sector, and on the European side, our speakers will reflect on current and future contributions to Africa's vision through a diverse set of bilateral and community instruments, policies, and partnerships. So let me introduce the distinguished speakers. You have just heard Ms. Tanja Fajon, Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Foreign and European Affairs of Slovenia. We have with us Madame Bestine Kazadi-Ditabala, Minister Delegate in charge of international cooperation and Francophonie from the Democratic Republic of Congo. We have Johan Borgstam, European Union Special Representatives for the Great Lakes region. Ms. Marietta Jager, European Commission, Deputy Director General at the Directorate General International Partnerships, known as DG INPA. And Ms. Sheila Kama, former CEO of De Beers, Botswana. Sheila is an expert in mining governance. Welcome to all the speakers. Just a note to the audience, our first speaker will be speaking in French, so I advise the non-Francophone panelists and audience to put on the headphones for translation. So let's start. Madame Minister Delegate, Democratic Republic of Congo is one of the richest African countries when it comes to natural resources endowment, be it critical minerals or water. What is your country's strategy in managing its natural wealth, particularly in terms of inclusive, ethical, and equitable governance of natural resources? Madam, you have the floor.
Alors, d'abord, bonjour, mesdames, messieurs, excellences, et messieurs et mesdames les experts. La stratégie du gouvernement de la République démocratique du Congo en matière de gouvernance sur les ressources naturelles, c'est de optimaliser nos ressources, nos minerais stratégiques pour aider à l'accélération de la transformation de nos économies au bénéfice de nos communautés. Alors, comment est-ce qu'on y arrive? On a, je pense, deux défis majeurs. Le premier, c'est d'abord la durabilité environnementale. Il est important de préserver l'écosystème avec des études environnementales importantes, pertinentes, et aussi le respect des droits humains, c'est-à-dire mettre en exergue la responsabilité sociétale des exploitants. Le droit minier, le code minier congolais prévoit d'ailleurs la création d'écoles, prévoit la création de centres de santé, des routes, des dessertes agricoles, tout ça pour être au service en fait du bien-être de nos communautés. Nous avons également dans le code minier une redevance minière qui est évaluée à 40% et qui sert en fait à financer des projets, mais des projets d'intérêt de communautés locales. Le deuxième défi, à part la durabilité environnementale et économique, c'est également d'ajouter une plus-value locale. C'est-à-dire que jusqu'aujourd'hui, on avait l'habitude en République démocratique du Congo de vendre des minerais bruts au prix du marché, qui était d'ailleurs, le prix était imposé par l'offre et la demande mondiale. Aujourd'hui, notre ambition, c'est de transformer les produits, donc les minerais bruts, en produits finis, à travers évidemment une chaîne de valeur locale, donc pour absorber le chômage. Tout à l'heure, Madame la ministre des Affaires étrangères de la Slovénie a marqué l'accent sur la jeunesse. C'est vrai qu'en Afrique, notamment dans mon pays, en République démocratique du Congo, sur 100 millions d'habitants, 65% est constitué de jeunes qui ont moins de 30 ans. Donc on a une jeunesse innovante, dynamique, qui a besoin bien sûr d'emploi et donc d'employabilité. Donc notre ambition, c'est d'attirer des investissements afin de créer des usines de transformation, des usines de métallurgie, des usines de sidérurgie, qui partiraient de l'extraction des minerais, passant par la séparation, le raffinage, etc., la production de métaux, et commercialiser le minerai en République démocratique du Congo. Alors, pour ce faire, il faut bien sûr un approvisionnement responsable tout au long de la chaîne de valeur, mais le président de la République met vraiment un accent sur, et ça c'est tout nouveau, sur au bénéfice des communautés et de l'environnement. Et cela, ça répond également à le nouvel équilibre mondial face aux enjeux majeurs qui sont la crise climatique et la transition énergétique. Alors là, je voudrais quand même parler de cela rapidement, parce que la crise climatique, en fait, on présente aujourd'hui la République démocratique du Congo comme un pays solution. Un pays solution au niveau notamment de la crise climatique, parce que la République démocratique du Congo est le deuxième poumon du monde. Donc, elle assure une décarbonisation grâce au bassin du Congo. Le bassin du Congo, dont le territoire représente 65% en République démocratique du Congo, est constitué de forêts de tourbières, dont le stock naturel absorbe aujourd'hui 40 000 tonnes de carbone mondial. Donc, la crise climatique passe et est enfin en tout cas trouve une des solutions en République démocratique du Congo. En matière de transition énergétique, vous savez que la République démocratique du Congo possède 70% de la production du cobalt. Nous sommes aussi producteurs de coltan, de lithium, enfin tous les minerais stratégiques qui sont utiles à la transition énergétique. Aujourd'hui, nous avons également des eaux douces. Quelques chiffres, le bassin du Congo regorge 52% de réserves d'eau de surface et 23% d'eau renouvelable sur toute l'Afrique. Donc, on peut dire que la transition énergétique ne pourra pas se faire sans la République démocratique du Congo. Peut-être pour terminer rapidement, pour ne pas prendre trop de temps, nous avons également évidemment le PNSD, qui est le Plan national de stratégie du développement, qui concerne les années 2024-2028 et qui comprend 5 objectifs stratégiques pour répondre justement à cette gouvernance des minerais stratégiques. D'abord, le premier objectif, c'est de renforcer les capacités institutionnelles. Il faut accroître la formation de techniciens spécialisés, de cadres qualifiés, et tout ça, on va travailler avec le ministère de l'enseignement supérieur et universitaire, avec les centres de recherche scientifiques, avec le ministère des Affaires étrangères, bien sûr. Et pour cela, il est prévu des formations continues pour justement assurer cet accroissement économique et également, dans le cadre de mon travail, un renforcement de la coopération avec des centres de formation et de recherche étrangères. Deuxième objectif important du PNSD, c'est d'actualiser les données des réserves minérales. C'est important d'avoir des données géologiques et minières et des infrastructures numériques de géodonnées afin de pouvoir attirer des investissements au niveau des recherches donc des recherches des ressources minières. Également, développer une industrie minière compétitive qui va permettre la création d'emplois. Notamment, nous avons commencé déjà à transformer nos sociétés minières de l'État en sociétés commerciales. Nous avons également mis l'accent sur la promotion, comme je vous ai dit tout à l'heure, de l'industrie métallurgique et de la sidérurgie. Également, on voudrait valoriser les sous-produits de l'extraction métallurgique, du cuivre par exemple, du cobalt, de l'or et d'autres produits. Et tout ça, c'est vraiment en vue de capter la demande des pays développés en minerais étrangers. Nous avons également la réalisation de zones économiques spéciales. Tout à l'heure, si vous me le permettez, je parlerai de l'expérience entre la Zambie et la République démocratique du Congo sur la production des batteries électriques pour les véhicules. Également, on voudrait renforcer les engagements en matière de responsabilité, tout à l'heure on en a parlé, les responsabilités sociales et environnementales des opérateurs miniers, c'est très important, et également élaborer un plan énergétique et un plan de désenclavement des sites miniers. On voudrait également améliorer la performance de l'artisanat minier. Beaucoup de nos communautés locales travaillent dans les mines et exploitent cet artisanat minier. On voudrait renforcer les capacités de ces acteurs pour permettre d'aller vers ce qu'on appelle maintenant le développement de la petite mine. Donc de rendre plus technique l'artisanat minier de nos communautés locales. Et évidemment, dernier objectif, c'est la promotion de la République démocratique du Congo comme une destination fiable, crédible des investissements étrangers. Alors évidemment, il y a des préalables pour ça. Évidemment, il faut renforcer les mesures de protection des investissements, il faut stabiliser le régime fiscal, il faut des garanties diverses contre les expropriations, il faut également la traçabilité des substances minérales qui sont issues de l'exploitation minière. Il faut également créer peut-être un fonds de promotion du secteur minier Et tout ça dans le but d'améliorer la position de la RDC à travers une bonne gouvernance, la lutte contre la corruption, etc. Je pense que, en gros, c'est un petit peu cela sur lequel se base la stratégie de la République démocratique du Congo en matière de gestion des ressources naturelles.
Merci beaucoup. Merci beaucoup, Madame Ministre déléguée. This was I think this is a very comprehensive development strategy, and I'm glad you mentioned also the role of your country in terms of the mitigation, climate change mitigation. Now I turn to, thank you very much. Now I turn to our next speaker, who also comes from a very rich country in terms of natural resources, Botswana. Ms. Kama, Botswana is hailed as an exception from the so-called resource curse. It is the second largest world exporter of diamonds, and this represents 30% of the GDP. What can you tell us about the governance of natural resources in Botswana and its contribution to the country's development? But also, are you satisfied with your government's approach to inclusive and transparent regulation and environmental standards? Coming from the private sector, what do you see as the main bottlenecks in advancing value-added transition? Sorry. Yeah, I think that's enough for the first question.
Thank you very much. So I think I should preface my comments by saying that I am neither a civil servant nor a corporate executive. I'm here in my capacity as an associate fellow of Chatham House, and I do what I do here today as a public good. And so while I'm quite comfortable to speak on matters of natural resources in Botswana, it's important to know this is not an official position. Be that as it may, let me start with your first question of Botswana's governance of natural resources. And I like that you say natural resources, not mineral resources. Because the intersection of mineral resources and renewable resources is fundamentally the gap between sustainable development or the lack thereof. And so our ability to have policies that balance these type of resources is critical for the future. In Botswana, the country's economy is driven by minerals and then tourism. And tourism is fundamentally because of natural capital, which is to say our wetlands and the entire ecosystem and what it offers in terms of holiday destination. Both of them, if I think of governance, both of them derive fundamentally from the country's constitution and then its laws. The Botswana's constitution vests all natural resources in the state, which is the state. The state is the sole owner of all underground resources. And the state manages the resources ostensibly for the benefit of the citizens. So that is the top level in terms of the government structure. The second tier then is the laws. The laws then give the powers to the state to license third parties to explore and exploit the resources. And underpinning those laws are not just the mineral law or the environmental law, they are also tax laws. The mineral laws essentially give rights to say, what is the split of rights between the rights that accrue to the state and the right that accrues to the investor? And the goal is to protect national interests while giving value and potential return to the investor. The balance of the two, if I think of Botswana's system, sits at the core of why the country has succeeded, especially in relation to the balance of value by the state and that of investors. If one thinks then of financial value as in fiscal policy, Botswana has a hierarchy of who gets what. In the first instance, as the owner of the resource, the state is entitled to rent. That is to say, the right to be paid for merely extracting, whether the companies sell profitably or not. If you think about it in terms of property, if you lease my house for purpose of business, whether your company profits or not is of no consequence. You pay me rent. That's the same logic. The second logic in the fiscal space is corporate tax, which is applied not necessarily uniquely to mining, but across industries. The third, and this is important, is equity. In Botswana's laws, the government has the right to take a share in every mineral project. The share, the maximum of it is 25%. It can be negotiated upwards or downwards. In the case of diamonds, by reason of the extent of the economic value and financial value of the resource, not just to the state, but also to my former employer, De Beers, the state upped that equity to 50%, in the knowledge that the value of the diamonds, the revenue derived, will still allow De Beers to be able to reap a reasonable return, and that has been the case essentially for the last 50 years or so. Why is this important? This is important not just because you have three streams of revenue, but actually, the hierarchy means that the government has three streams of revenue where the foreign investor has only one stream, and that is when the dividend is paid. The result of which is that, as I speak with you today, the ratio of income from diamonds in my country that goes to the state is 81 cents to the dollar, where De Beers only gets 19%. That said, let me make it as clear as I can. De Beers is not disadvantaged. Actually, De Beers' receipt is so significant, the 19% alone equates 60% of that company's entire worldwide revenue. That is how equitable it is. What this tells us is that it's not enough to just tax foreign companies fairly. The ranking of the sources of income matter, because in a state in which the state is the owner of the revenue, fair sharing suggests that the owner would get a better share than the investor, but it also suggests that the investor would get a fair return for the specific investment that is made. This is the counterpole. You asked me about environment. So in Botswana, 30% of the entire land mass, which is nearly the equivalent of France, is state reserves. So in our country, the protection of the environment for intergenerational value is a given. These state reserves are there to protect fauna and flora and certain indigenous minorities whose lifestyle is consistent with the historic way of nomadic life. So that is the big picture. The second thing is this, that quite apart from the standard requirement for environmental impact assessment, Botswana is one of the first countries to contemplate and draft a law in which, from the moment mining companies start to extract resources, they must create a trust fund in which they deposit money based on an assessment of what it would cost to reclaim the environment. But not just to create a trust fund in which they deposit, but that trust fund will be audited annually, consistent with the environmental reclamation plan, to ensure that there is enough in the fund year on year to do that which is necessary to restore the environment. This is critical because not only does value in money terms change, the very standard for reclamation change, and therefore the importance of keeping up with both the resource but also the standards is at the core of this trust fund. You asked about the contribution of natural resources. As I said, At the top is mining, through diamonds primarily, and then secondly is tourism. So in Botswana, the economy fundamental does not exist without natural resources. For us, that is our lifeblood.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's very impressive.
Thank you.
And the interdependence of tourism and mineral extraction. If the mineral extraction pollutes the environment, then there's no tourism. So that's a very positive codependency. Thank you very much. Now I turn to my minister. We've heard two very interesting stories and models. How does Slovenia support this vision for sustainable management of natural resources?
First, it was really interesting to listen to both ladies with the experience of understanding of the strategies, of the approach, how best to manage and use in a sustainable way natural resources. Let me just start by reflecting the mindset of our country, because I think that the protection of the environment and of the water resources, of clean water, clean air, is something that is actually in the heart of our citizens. It's a key priority. One can say that from young generation on, people not only feel, live, but really care about the environment and about the clean water. So when thinking about what can Slovenia contribute, and you explained very well what is the strategy. On one hand, of course, the economic and the social development of any country really depends on sustainable use and management of natural resources. So it's very important how you can create the environment to manage well, to use it well, that goes from education, awareness, you spoke about human rights, equality, and creating at the same time added value for the society. So Slovenia is a small country, but we can do our utmost in sharing our experience, our knowledge, and also promoting sustainable investments in protecting natural resources. And this is what we are trying to do with our know-how from circular economy, how to create added value, how to protect the environment. Also, what we have specific know-how is transboundary water management, especially in conflicts, which we are dealing a lot recently through the Security Council in the United Nations. We are living in times with a lot of armed conflicts, but the management transboundary of water resources, and this put in the system, I think it's extremely important. So also how we can best share our experience from different parts of the world. But for that, I think it's extremely important that we are capable of listening each other, hearing each other, and also understanding what is going on. I think Slovenia is quite a reliable partner to African countries, looking to the history. I think especially when I travel around, I feel we have a credibility of a country that is not burdened with the history, but really tries to be a true partner, with mostly what we can share with our knowledge. So I think this is, when I speak with young people from societies which are also hindered with financial resources, maybe reaching natural resources, but you have to have also financial resources, structures in the country, institutions that are functioning. All that means how to manage what you have there. So I think this is a joint effort where we can do a lot, Africa, Europe together in our partnership, but also Slovenia. This is what we can basically deliver and what we are trying to deliver through the development cooperation projects. And in fact, we have quite many of them in African continent.
Thank you very much, Madam Minister. Ms. Jager, sustainable management of natural resources is an important element of EU-Africa partnership. Which instruments is the European Union, and particularly your directorate, using to support Africa's vision?
Hvala, Tanja. Thank you very much, spoštovana gospa ministrica, Madame la Ministre, Special Representative, all dear ex-colleagues. It's a pleasure and honor to be in Ljubljana again. And congratulations to the Foreign Ministry for yet another Africa Day. European Commission has been partnering with Slovenia for a long time in organizing Africa Days, and I think that today's event on natural resources and potential for sustainable development is one of the most important ones. Let me start by saying that in these really challenging times of insecurity, instability, of crumbling of the world order, challenging multilateralism on top of all, I would say, crises we know, from climate to security crisis, I think that the partnerships are more important than ever. So Africa-Europe partnership is essential. And that's why our guiding principle is basically joint vision for 2030 that was adopted at the 6th summit, and we are working on that. Minister just mentioned before that on the 21st of May, we had a ministerial EU-AU in Brussels, where this joint vision, including the global gateway strategy to boost the investments in Africa, was reinforced and basically given the opportunity to give a new impetus and also to prepare the next summit that we are heading in 25. So basically what we need is working closer together and basically working together to bring the investments in order to build the growth in prosperity in Africa. And since 2022, basically, the EU in the Team Europe approach, and Minister mentioned we have a lot of Team Europe project together, especially on transboundary water cooperation in Africa and Central Asia. We put together the Global Gateway Africa-Europe investment package of 150 billion to be delivered by 27. And basically, we are using all the tools in our toolbox, from grants to blending, but now more and more also innovative financing through our European Sustainable Development Plus Fund, where basically we de-risking the investment. And so far we have put almost 20 billion in Africa. Coming now to the, of course, potentials. I'm not going to tell you that we are the biggest trading partners. Minister, you know that very well. We have the biggest share of foreign investments in Africa. But moreover, Africa's potential is enormous. Just to mention, the best solar resources, or 30% of the minerals critical for green and digital transition, are coming from Africa. But the partnership is also essential for the CRM. I mean, let me give you a little overview. Our action on this, it's based on the Critical Raw Materials Act that was in all the wisdom adopted by the Council of Ministers of EU and European Parliament, and basically entered into force in May 24. And a part of the long list of actions that I'm not going to bother you with, I mean, we have Article 9, where basically we were tasked to do the strategic partnerships with our development partners and to conclude as many as possible memorandums of understanding. This is a legally non-binding instrument, it's a political instrument. So to basically partner with our developing partners in order to deliver on the CRM. And of course, as Minister said, and that for me is the most important, so far we concluded 14th memorandum of understanding, and 4 with the African countries. So it's a real honor, Minister, to say that we have one with the DRC, we have one with Zambia, Namibia, and Rwanda. But basically, while strategic partnerships do have a goal to contribute to the EU security of supply for CRM, partnership must be mutually beneficially for all partner countries, meaning that according, I think it's Article 37, where states that the local added value needs to be essential. So that means that all our memorandums are based on the contribute or needs to contribute to local value addition and basically beneficial for all countries included. And also that principle is a guiding principle when it comes to the selection of the individual projects, but also to basically we focus on the whole value chain and not only on the extraction. So that is important also for Botswana. So let me give you just a couple of tools that we use just to conclude my very short presentation. I'm going to read it because, you know, they prepared that to me. So to improve the business and regulatory environment, advance environmental, social and government standards and responsible sourcing. This is the guiding principle, not from today. We've been partnering with EITI for more than the decades. We got observation status there in 2020. And basically we've been paying for a lot of projects, you know, in terms of transparency and traceability. But also we are providing direct technical assistance and really ensure strategic visibility and alignment. So that's why, let me conclude, we are looking forward to implement all this partnership in line with the interest and the needs of our partner countries. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Jager. It's encouraging to hear about the financial and political commitment of the EU to the partnership with Africa on mutual beneficial basis. So to add to this layer, Ms. Borgstam, your mandate is interesting, linking peace and security and development and natural resources management. Could you please reflect on the political and security situation in the Great Lakes region and the current geopolitical context, especially focusing on the growing competition around natural resources and what that means for the countries of the region? I understand you've just returned from Uganda, where you attended the ministerial follow-up to the Addis Ababa Framework for Peace, Security and Cooperation in the Democratic Republic of Congo in the Great Lakes region. And was this part of the discussions held there?
Yes. So, dear Foreign Minister, dear Marietta, dear Sheila, dear colleagues, it's a great pleasure and honor to be here. I wish that more European Union member states could follow in the footsteps of Slovenia, because Europe needs more Africa Days. Also commend the foreign minister for her shuttle diplomacy in Africa. I'm proud to say that I will follow in her footsteps in the coming weeks, including to Togo to engage with President Gnassingbé given his role in the ongoing peace negotiations. Now, many thanks for the question. I think it's worth taking a step back and to reflect on the Great Lakes and particularly on the Democratic Republic of Congo, because we need to think about the scale. And when I say scale, I mean both scale when it comes to challenges, but also scale when it comes to opportunities. And sometimes I find if we start with the geographical scale, you will surely know that Minister Bestin's country is it's roughly 2.3 million square kilometers, so you can easily and nicely fit entire Western Europe in the DRC, and from east to west it's roughly 2,000 kilometers. But it's also about scale when it comes to the population, and it is a young population, just like the minister noted. When I left my post as Swedish ambassador in Kinshasa in 2010, we estimated the population at about 60 million. Now, 15 years later, the DRC has a population of about 105, 110 million. So the demographic change, the demographic development, it's happening very, very fast. But it's also about scale when it comes to the geology, the geological riches, as the Minister Kasadi and the others have referred to. But also there, and I think Marietta also referred to that, that if we want to believe and hope sincerely in Europe about the green transition, digital transition, and now also rearmament, it's impossible to believe in this and to realize these visions without enduring stability and prosperity in the Great Lakes. Because in the DRC you find more than 50% of the world's cobalt. I think roughly 40% of the world's coltan production takes place in the DRC. And as you know, without coltan, we won't have neither smartphones nor iPads. But and I was very happy that this was noted as well. It's not just about the geological riches, the mineral riches. It's also about the fact that the Congo rainforest is the second largest carbon sink in the world. So we keep coming back to the Great Lakes region, and particularly the DRC. It's not just about the future of Africa, it's about the future of our global community. But sadly, this issue of scale is also about the scale of political challenges, including violence. And when I left Kinshasa in 2010, we used to refer to roughly 50 armed groups in Eastern DRC. Now we talk about more than 200. You will be familiar with the rebellion by the Rwanda-supported M23 movement that now controls huge swathes of territory in Eastern DRC. But you also have organizations such as the ADF, which last year killed more than 3,000 Congolese civilians, and the ADF, as you know, is an offshoot of the Islamic State. And these crises, the security crisis, the political crisis, has resulted in a huge humanitarian crisis, with now between 7 to 8 million internally displaced, and more than 6 million of those Congolese citizens are displaced because of violence. So it's scale when it comes to opportunities, but also scale when it comes to challenges. I think that good news is that virtually all African leaders I engage with in my diplomacy in the region agree on one thing, and that is that there is no military solution to the challenges in the Great Lakes. There is only a political solution imaginable. And here we come back to the issue of natural resources, because the way I see it, it will ultimately be about regional economic integration. The irony or the paradox, if you wish, is that there is actually a very high level of regional economic integration between the Great Lakes countries. Unfortunately, this regional economic integration is to a large extent an illicit regional economic integration, characterized by illegal criminal networks, state interference, and so on. So the challenge will be, and also Minister Kasadi referred to that in her intervention, and the Congolese vision is to formalize what is now an informal economic integration. I think I will have to stop there in the interest of time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you for mentioning the regional integration, because this is what our next set of questions are going to refer to, more from the legal regional integration point of view. Madam Minister Delegate, yeah, you have the microphone, okay. How do you see the importance of interregional coordination and trade, particularly in terms of enhancing complementarities within the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement? You already mentioned the project you have with Zambia, but I'm sure there are other projects, considerations for regional cooperation and trade in mind, please.
Alors, merci, mais avant de répondre à la question, peut-être je voudrais donner un petit complément d'information de ce que le représentant de l'Union européenne dans la région des Grands Lacs vient de dire à propos de mon pays, la République démocratique du Congo. Il faut peut-être pas parler vraiment de violence, mais plutôt d'expansion territoriale, de violation de l'intégrité territoriale de mon pays, parce qu'aujourd'hui, la République démocratique du Congo est occupée par une armée étrangère, qui est l'armée rwandaise. Et aujourd'hui, au niveau de l'est de mon pays, c'est-à-dire des villes comme Goma, Bukavu, elles sont occupées par des troupes armées rwandaises. Il est vrai qu'aujourd'hui, il y a des accords, notamment l'Union africaine a été et est toujours d'ailleurs le médiateur, le facilitateur principal, d'abord avec le président de l'Angola, le président Lorenzo, à travers la feuille de route de Luanda. Également les accords de Nairobi sur la gestion des groupes armés. Alors c'est le M23, le mouvement du 23 mars, c'est comme ça qu'on l'appelle, le M23, qui sont les supplétifs rwandais qui occupent notre territoire, avec bien sûr, comme l'a dit monsieur le représentant de l'Union européenne dans la région des Grands Lacs, avec évidemment d'autres groupes armés, comme de nombreux groupes armés. Aujourd'hui, je ne sais pas exactement le nombre, mais en tout cas, à Nairobi, ça a été la grosse question, était justement la gestion de ces groupes armés. Donc, je voulais quand même donner une précision. Donc, on ne parle pas ici de violence, mais on parle de violation de l'intégrité territoriale de mon pays. Et ça, c'est quelque chose d'inadmissible. Parce que surtout, et là, je fais vite peut-être un petit parallèle avec la région des Balkans et la région des Grands Lacs. La région des Balkans a également, je pense, vécu un genre de, peut-être un comparatif avec la région des Grands Lacs sur l'appropriation des territoires, des frontières. Et je pense qu'aujourd'hui, vous êtes arrivés en tout cas à des accords de paix et à une gestion des limitations. Nous, on est en plein processus et comme l'a dit monsieur le représentant, évidemment, l'économique, les projets intégrateurs, et là, donc je réponds à votre question, les projets intégrateurs régionaux économiques sont évidemment une des réponses principales à la gestion de la guerre aujourd'hui. Alors, bon, d'abord, avant de répondre véritablement à la question de fond, je voudrais aussi préciser que la République démocratique du Congo, mon pays, est enclavée, c'est-à-dire elle est entourée de 9 pays voisins, avec comme seule sortie, comme seul accès à l'extérieur, une espèce de couloir de plus ou moins 45 km qui donne sur l'océan Atlantique. Donc, évidemment, madame, la coopération régionale, la coordination régionale est absolument importante, primordiale pour mon pays. D'ailleurs, nous avons un ministre qui est chargé de l'intégration régionale, qui a en charge justement cette question de coopération. Et moi, en tant que ministre de la coopération internationale, bien sûr, la coopération régionale fait partie d'un de mes portefeuilles. Alors, comment résoudre ce problème, en tout cas le problème de la RDC dans la sous-région, dans la région des Grands Lacs? C'est évidemment, il faut procéder à ce qu'on appelle l'interconnectivité. L'interconnectivité, d'abord à l'intérieur de mon pays, donc il faut des investissements importants au niveau des infrastructures routières, ferroviaires, aériennes évidemment, mais également un accès vers l'extérieur à travers la création de ce qu'on appelle les corridors économiques, les corridors de transport. Et là, pour exemple, il y a un grand corridor que vous connaissez tous, je pense, vous avez entendu parler, c'est le fameux corridor de l'Obito, qui est un corridor qui est évalué à 7 milliards de dollars d'investissement et qui est un corridor qui va relier la Zambie, la République démocratique du Congo et l'Angola, et qui va permettre le transport des ressources minières, le transport des biens et des personnes avec un accès direct vers l'océan Atlantique. Il y a également le corridor de Gitega, qui est un corridor qui donne un accès à l'océan Indien. Pour l'instant, on est sur l'étude de préfaisabilité. C'est un corridor. Ah voilà, exactement. L'Union européenne y est derrière. Et notamment l'Union européenne, il y a la BAD aussi, la Banque africaine de développement. Et là, c'est un corridor qui va donner, donc, comme j'ai dit, sortie vers l'océan Indien et qui va relier la RDC, le Burundi et la Tanzanie. Donc, il faut évidemment créer de nombreux corridors qui vont permettre les accès du nord au sud et de l'est et à l'ouest vers la région et vers le continent et même vers l'international. Donc ça, c'est la première chose. La deuxième chose qui est aussi très importante, vous l'avez parlé, madame, c'est la zone de libre-échange. Alors, il faut savoir que la zone de libre-échange est un marché évalué à 1,3 milliard de consommateurs. Donc, c'est énorme. C'est pratiquement toute la sphère de l'Union africaine qui correspond à plus ou moins, je crois, 55 pays, dont des pays membres, dont 47 sont véritablement rattachés à l'Union africaine. Il y a également ce qu'on appelle les zones économiques spéciales. Et c'est là où je vous rejoins dans le modèle RDC et Zambie. Alors, il faut savoir que c'est donc évidemment un projet de coopération bilatérale, transfrontalier, régional donc, et qui va porter sur le développement d'une usine de fabrication, on les appelle de précurseurs parce que c'est tout nouveau, de batteries pour les véhicules électriques. Alors, c'est quelque chose, c'est un contrat, un accord de coopération qui a été signé entre nos deux pays, qui est très important parce que ça va d'abord, c'est un accord historique, un premier accord, c'est un précédent, et ça va également faciliter le développement de la chaîne de valeur dans le secteur des batteries électriques et de l'énergie propre. Donc vraiment, nos deux pays, la Zambie et la République démocratique du Congo, abritent 80% des minerais qui sont nécessaires à la production de ces batteries de voitures électriques. Donc cette coopération transfrontalière va évidemment va aussi aller vers une expansion vers le marché sud-africain qui est considéré comme un client important donc un premier grand client. Donc c'est de nouveau une expansion de la coordination régionale et un accord transfrontalier important. Donc, tout cela va évidemment nous permettre une mise en commun des ressources régionales et ça va nous permettre de libérer le potentiel africain. Tout à l'heure, monsieur le représentant le disait, que l'économie est une des grandes réponses au problème de la guerre dans notre région des Grands Lacs. Et en libérant ce potentiel économique africain, ça va également nous permettre une industrialisation de l'Afrique qui va être basée sur un développement durable et inclusif. Également, cette coopération transfrontalière entre la Zambie et la RDC comme modèle précurseur amène évidemment une valeur ajoutée à nos ressources naturelles, puisque ça va être... Tout à l'heure, Madame la ministre des Affaires étrangères parlait de l'environnement, qu'il faut créer un environnement de bien-être pour les communautés, un environnement de justice sociale également. Donc ça va permettre aussi la création de millions d'emplois pour cette jeunesse africaine et également une coopération qui va être basée, une coopération scientifique qui va être basée sur, d'ailleurs ça a été créé dernièrement, ce qu'on appelle le centre d'excellence africain. Et ce centre d'excellence africain va être au service de la formation, tout à l'heure on en a beaucoup parlé, de la formation des jeunes en compétences batterie électrique et va permettre évidemment aussi une coopération entre la Zambie et la RDC sur les formations en mines et en polytechnique et tout cela. Donc, oui, pour répondre à votre question, madame, la coopération régionale est très importante pour l'Afrique en général et même pour l'international, puisque c'est un marché en pleine croissance et un marché qui est basé aussi qui offre une main-d'œuvre de qualité à travers cette jeunesse qui est innovante, dynamique et importante.
Merci. Merci, Madame Ministre. And thank you for stressing on the importance of interconnectivity, which is, of course, a precondition for any kind of regional integration. I will now turn to my minister because she needs to 15 minutes. Yeah, sure. No, just to be safe, on the safe side. I would like to refer to a natural resource, and we are talking here about natural resources, not just about critical minerals, but to water, because it's the most crucial and essential of all natural resources and the most irreplaceable one. And of course, a basis for sustainable development. So how does Slovenia engage in efforts to achieve a more water-secure Africa?
Yes, thank you. I actually started already before. Seems that immediately my thoughts go to how to make water resources really well protected and secure world with water. I think that Slovenia is quite a front runner when it comes to international efforts to support a more water secure world. Not only, we also, I think, strongly believe that what is needed is a just and equitable access to water all around the world that, as I said before, strengthens social and cohesion and also prevents conflicts. When it comes to management, I think we also strongly believe that we need to have a just, transparent and equitable managing process. When you look the reality in the world, you see that the women are quite often or most often affected by water crisis. On the other hand, they are most often excluded from the management of sustainable use of water resources. So I think here we also strive to reach better balance. We know from our own experience that the joint and equitable management of shared water resources brings really multiple effects and benefits and also strengthens peace. I would like to bring your attention to the conference that we hosted last year in Ljubljana, last October. It was the biggest international gathering on transboundary water cooperation. We had about 31 African countries attending, 11 at ministerial level. It was extremely important because it showed the commitment to managing their shared water effectively and to exchange this know-how and expertise. So we are really here very much ready to offer technical assistance to the new parties of the convention and those in pre-accession process. It's also interesting when we speak about transboundary cooperation that we also see here how the women are also excluded or underrepresented in this transboundary cooperation. And we here support strongly the global network of women in water diplomacy, which Slovenia started supporting when it was built at Nile network. So, And I was really happy to see we are preparing now for the new conference, water conference in New York. I attended myself in 2023, I think it was the conference, together with the president and you, Tanya. It took us, or it took, and you, sorry, Marietta, it took us around, or not us, the United Nations, it took around 46 years before such conference in New York has been organized. And it was a great success in terms that there were some achievements, especially also the special UN envoy for water diplomacy and wide strategy on water. And I am happy to see that it won't take another 46 years to have such conference, because it will be in 2026, and Slovenia will be also present in preparations later next year, or this year, sorry, in Dakar. So these are these little bits and parts we can contribute, but I think we are very strong and vocal when it comes the importance in the international efforts, as I said before, how to best secure water around the globe. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. And now I'm going back to the regional cooperation theme. Ms. Kana, how do you estimate the progress in terms of regional cooperation and developing common standards? I know there's a regional certification, mineral certification mechanism for the Great Lakes. Is there something also in the Southern African region, something similar? And how do you see the potential of creation of regional value chains?
Thank you very much. I wanted to quickly just say how important the subject of water is. In my previous remarks, I reminded us of the intersection of renewables and non-renewables. None is greater than water and land, in whether one is dealing with oil and gas, or whether one is dealing with agriculture, or whether one is dealing with industrial mining. Water is one of the most important components, and yet, if we are not careful, we forget that as we manage water, fundamentally we are dealing with people's basic human rights. The ability to adjudicate access to water such that we don't constrain industry, but do not motivate industrial development at the expense of people's basic rights, in my opinion, sits at the heart of the very concept of sustainable development. But that was not your question. Your question was more regional integration. So, in my observation, certain phrases and words roll off the tongue very easily, and therefore create the illusion they are themselves easy. Regional integration is a case in point. On the other hand, we think of regional integration, we think of it as a process. Actually, regional integration, in my opinion, is the outcome. And to achieve regional integration comes first certain fundamental things, and here they are. First of all, you need policies that transcend national interests, which is to say you place economic development at regional level above your national political aspirations. If you can do that, you've taken the single first important step. Otherwise, what you have is a race to the bottom in which Botswana says, we want to beneficiate our diamonds. The South African says, we want to beneficiate our diamonds. The result, you have no regional integration. This is important. The second ingredient for regional integration is infrastructure, which is to say rail infrastructure, road infrastructure, energy infrastructure, ITC infrastructure. Without this, there is no regional integration, because these are the fundamental ingredients for being able to, and therefore harmonizing the standards around infrastructure, ensuring mutual benefit across borders unleashes. So bad is infrastructure in Africa, in the energy, road and rail, that in South Africa, at the time when copper is a critical mineral, copper and iron ore mining companies have reduced their mining because there is no rail to move the ore, and there is no ports. How tragic is that in 2025? And how do you even begin to speak of regional integration if you don't have this? And so my sense is that understanding not just the inputs, but the policy trade-offs, because policy like strategy is really about maximizing the rewards while minimizing the risks. Policy is about trade-offs. Where in the regional integration policy space do you put the country forward, and where do you put the region forward? A mapping of these trade-offs and acceptance that the sum of the parts is greater than the parts is the answer to regional integration. On the African continent, we have talked about it. We have had protocol after protocol. But even as I speak with you today, it is much harder for me to travel from Botswana to another African country than it is to come to Europe. How regionally integrated can you be if you can't even move your people and goods? So this infrastructure, including laws, trade laws, in my humble opinion, is the beginning. And if you do that, you will get somewhere. Because I'm in the mineral space, let me be very specific about mining. So geology was infinitely smarter than modern politicians. Because if you think of how the African map is, between South Africa and Zimbabwe, you have the platinum belt. Between Botswana, South Africa, the DRC, and Namibia, you have the diamond belt. Between the DRC and Zambia, you have the copper belt. Between Sierra Leone, Guinea, Liberia, you have the iron ore belt. And then between Burkina Faso, Ghana, Mali, you have the gold belt. There is your regional integration. You use the mineral footprint to say, what does the mining footprint tell us about who our logical trade partners in the supply chain, in the mining, in the processing, and in the fabrications are? The answer is just watch your geology. It cannot be simpler. But then I'm not a politician.
Thank you so much. This is such a fascinating and rich debate, but, and I'm sorry to say, I think the organizers are just giving us a few minutes more. So I think we'll skip the last round of questions, but if you can pack maybe the perspective of the last question also in your responses to the rest of the second ones. Ms. Jager, we have heard that resource extraction is often driven by foreign companies and multinational corporations which focus on export with little benefit to the local population in African countries. What steps has the EU taken to ensure responsible and sustainable extraction and trade of natural resources in Africa?
Yeah, thank you, Tanya. First, let me congratulate Minister Tanya, who just left, for all the Slovenia's action in water area, since I've been representing the EU for last water decade, as you know very well, in all the events. I know how much Slovenia has contributed, so congratulations. And to reply to your last, I would say, sentence, yes, we are absolutely aware that connectivity and basically bringing goods from A to B is the, precondition for any trade among African countries. And that's why, as I mentioned before, Global Gateway Strategy, it's not only about CRM, but it's all connectivity, it's energy. We have 11 sectors, and basically Lobito Corridor and other corridors that we are putting together will basically benefit for the regional integration. At least we sincerely hope so. But talking about the ethical and I would rather say sustainable, exploitation of the CRM, it's been a question, that many have been putting their heads together for many years. I mentioned before EITI, we started with 10 years ago, because we really believe that natural resources activities should really benefit the country and the people of where the resources are located. And that's why we've been supporting not only Secretariat, but also encouraging countries, especially in the region, to join the EITI and to adopt the standards that basically give the open access to data, accountability, and what we really need is due diligence, traceability, and transparency. And the memorandums that I mentioned before, all these standards, I would say, cooperation on environmental, social, and governance principles must be aligned with the international standards of EITI. And this is the precondition for cooperation. But not only that, we are basically putting enormous efforts in training. We have just, with the support of our geo-European societies, trained 2,000 geologists in Africa. So in order to be able really to add the local value that I mentioned before, but also we put together the CRM facility that offers the technical assistance. And we are also enhancing the cooperation in research and innovation sector, because we believe that brings the whole raw material value chain in place. And my last point is, and this is a personal one, since I personally visited a lot of mines in many of countries that you are coming from, to also Zambia and some others. I mean, yes, Minister, I agree with you. The informal mines, this is something that we need to tackle because there, the child labor, I would say, practices that we should not see still exist. And we put enormous project in this transparency initiative to boost really sustainable practices, not only with the World Bank, but also with the G7, like CONEX and all other multilateral, I would say, institutions in order to fight these unacceptable and inhuman practices. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Jager. So my final question, Mr. Borgstam, could you please elaborate a bit on how the conflict and natural resources interact in the Great Lakes region, and also on how the EU what's the EU role in that interplay?
Yeah, many thanks. First, when you refer to the inverted commas, the conflict in Eastern DRC, there, of course, I would like to join Minister Kasade to say that it is not only a mysterious conflict. An important element of this is the presence on Congolese territory of thousands of Rwandan soldiers, which constitutes a blatant violation of the territorial integrity of the Democratic Republic of the Congo. And if there's something that I've encountered in my exchanges in different African countries, it's of course, unfortunately, sometimes a suspicion that you Europeans, you only react when there is a violation of territorial integrity in your own neighborhood. So that's also why it's been extremely important for the European Union to make crystal clear that a violation of territorial integrity is a violation of territorial integrity, whether it takes place in Europe, in Africa, in Asia, or in Latin America. So following the Rwandan presence of soldiers on Congolese soil, there were also a number of targeted measures, meaning individual sanctions taken. So just so that I get that off my heart. When it comes to the role of natural resources and possible solutions to the ongoing challenges and conflicts in the Great Lakes, I think that on the one hand, we now see peace processes, including the initiative that our American friends have taken, that focus very clearly on the aspect of investments, of minerals, and so on. And in principle, that's, of course, a positive thing. It's also an important part of the European Union strategy for the Great Lakes. But here, you know, given past experiences, we should also be very clear in our messaging. Unfortunately, the Great Lakes doesn't only have an abundance of minerals and natural riches. The Great Lakes region also has an abundance of peace agreements. The Great Lakes has an abundance of analysis. What has been missing so far has not been commitments and signatures on documents. What have been missing for the last 30, 40 years is serious commitment on the leaders who signed these engagements to implement the engagements. And what does that mean in relation to what we're discussing now? I think a good way to make sure that agreements that we arrive at now don't amount to very much is to exclude the people most concerned, the people on the ground. If you don't have active participation and input from grassroots, from civil society into these negotiations, we risk ending up with yet another round of agreements negotiated in a classical top-down fashion. And if you do that, you will not have buy-in from the local level from the get-go. And this will be particularly important when you talk about natural resources. What we have to avoid at all costs is more agreements that basically focus exclusively on extraction. Because as Minister Kasadi repeatedly emphasized, the Congolese approach is to develop the value added of the production and extraction of minerals in the DRC and in the other Great Lake countries. If we sign agreements that basically is about extracting minerals from the topsoil of the Great Lakes region and then get it out of Africa and then refined and transformed in China or in other countries, we will not have achieved very much, and we will certainly not have contributed to a durable stabilization and a resolution to the conflicts in the Great Lakes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This has been a truly fascinating debate, which unfortunately I have to cut short right now. But we've heard fantastic examples on national strategies, on the need for regional integration, but also what are the challenges of it, and also the role that the EU can and must play in support of these African strategies. Thank you very much to all the panelists. Thank you to the audience for being here. Goodbye.
May I just congratulate you?
Merci beaucoup.
Hello.
Hello, can you
Yes,
hear me?
hi. Good. Yes, I can hear you perfectly. Okay, let me just open it. Okay, just a second. I need to communicate with the technician.
Sure.
Nimaš nič noter. Maša nimaš. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3 test. Maš? Kako ne? Čakaj, a daš ti... čakaj samo malo. Transition. Čakaj. Dej. Ja, čakaj. Imaš ti reglerje odprte? View. Gallery. Ampak ti bi zdaj mogel dobiti ven. Sound, Scarlett. Zdaj ga imaš. Okay. Okay, can you say something?
Hello, good morning. My name
Yes,
is Surya.
perfect.
I hope you can
Good.
hear me.
Okay, yes.
So let's hope the internet works because I'm outside and I'm using the hotspot of my phone, but I hope it works.
Okay, good. So when announced, just open your camera and this is it. Okay.
Sounds good. And if the internet is not working, I may turn off my video.
Yeah, I hope that it will work.
Yeah, let's see. Thank you.
Good. Thank you.
Maja, jaz sem ta zadnja, grem tle na konc. Pa dajmo tako nekaj. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Aha, si hle se bo kar dobro. Več nisem sprintala, pa moram priti. Ne, nema priti. Ja, je to treba prišli Ja. Ma jaz sem dala na ta PowerPoint, pa bom tam se hotela sprintati, sam je treba bolj ti printboxi iskati, pa vse knjigo in pol tam nekaj se logirati, pa Ampak imamo tako, da vsak svoje celo kupi, ne? Ali kako pa pol debata? Njega bomo takoj Mi boste lahko videti, ki mi ne pride iz konca manj.
Dear participants, please, I kindly ask you to join us in the main conference room. Please take your seats. I kindly invite everyone to take the seat and to join us for our next discussion. Our next panel bears the title, Challenges of the Use of the Non-Renewable Resources in the Light of Sustainable Development Principles. The moderator and the panelists are already on the stage. I would just like to inform you that the panel will be followed by a lunch outside the conference room. Please enjoy the debate.
The rest of the public is not joining us? I'm asking whether the rest of the public they enjoy the sunshine. Should we be there? Actually, we have to wait for the internet connection. He is? How do you know? Okay, okay. Hello, everyone. I see coffee and sunshine is more tempting than our panel, but hopefully people will join us later. We do have to start because our first speaker is joining us online, and we'll have to leave soon after his presentation, which means we have to start regardless of missing some members of the audience. My name is Maja Bučar. I come from the Faculty of Social Sciences. I have taught for years development studies, and That's how how our organizer has asked me to come and chair this panel, which is really quite an exceptional when I read the CVs of the participants here. So without further ado, because I see Professor Surya Deva is already online, I will give the word to him. He is the UN Special Rapporteur on the Right to Development, and at the same time also law professor at Macquarie University. I have discussed with him what would be the focus of his presentation, and of course the very concept of the right to development meets the title of our panel as a challenge, because I think the very essence of this right to development is quite a challenging topic. So I would like to ask you, Professor, to speak a little bit about the concept as well as about the promotion and implementation of such right. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, moderator. Good morning, everyone. My apologies that I cannot be there for the whole session, but I would like to thank the organizers of this conference for the invitation. I think the theme of this conference is very critical. The issues are very complex, but it is important that we discuss these issues and collectively find solutions that work for everyone. So the key message that I have in my intervention is that the right to development provides a framework to strike a balance between exploitation of natural resources, both renewable as well as non-renewable, at the same time protect the environment and ensure that we are able to manage climate change. So what I wish to do is, in my remarks, I will briefly talk about what is right to development, because this is a concept which is widely misinterpreted. There are a lot of misconceptions about what this right entails. So I would like to start with that. And then I will try to unpack, based on right to development, how this balancing framework should look like and what are the elements of that balancing framework. And happy to take some questions before I had to log off for another engagement, unfortunately. So I recently issued a leaflet in which I tried to unpack, and the title of the leaflet is Decoding the Right to Development. And I'm happy to share by email if anyone is interested to know more about this, in which I tried to simplify the key aspects of right to development. So let us start with the basic idea that this is a human right, like any other human right, civil, political, social, economic, and cultural rights that are codified, whether it is Universal Declaration of Human Rights or other covenants that are there. Now, this right has two dimensions. And those two dimensions are, it is an individual human right, but it is also a collective human right. Because it is a human right, each and every person, irrespective of where he or she is based, enjoys this human right. But the unique dimension of this right is it is also as a collective dimension. So people collectively also have a right to development. And this is not unique about right to development. The collective dimension we can see as part of many other human rights, including a more recently recognized right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment. Now, right to development has three key elements. Everyone should be able to participate in, contribute to, and enjoy the right to development. So this human right presupposes agency. So it's not merely a passive human right, but people are expected to actively engage and participate in the process to realize the development aspirations. At the same time, as Amrita Sen has argued, it is an obligation of the governments and other actors to create those conditions that people are able to realize development as freedom and those aspirations can be fulfilled. Now, right to development has four facets. Often we see it only in terms of economic development, which is a mistake. if you look at the 1986 Declaration on the Right to Development, it is very clear that there are 4 facets to this right, and economic facet is only one part of it. Social, cultural, and political development is equally important. So we cannot just pick the economic development aspect of this particular right. And let me finally say about the 5 principles that, in my view, are very central to how we should conceive this particular right. And these principles are, first, fair distribution. Now, if you look all over the world, we are grappling with significant inequalities in the world. And I think that is where fair distribution as a principle is crucial, because it articulates the importance that the economic benefits should be shared equitably. At the same time, we have significant discrimination practices continuing, and non-discrimination is a key aspect, but that's where the Beijing Declaration adds value about the intersectionality, because there are multiple layers of discrimination, and all of us are exposed to certain kind of discrimination, and that's where we need an intersectional approach to realize the right to development. The third principle is intergenerational equity. And in the context of this panel, this principle is absolutely relevant, because we have to realize the development aspirations, not merely of people at this particular point of time, but also the future generations. The fourth principle is self-determination. And again, in the context of this session and the conference generally, self-determination matters. People and the countries have a right to decide what kind of a development pathway is suitable for them. And of course, that entails having all the natural resources and the right to exploit them. And finally, cooperation. International cooperation is absolutely crucial in the context of right to development. And as I will try to highlight, without cooperation, it's just not possible to realize right to development or many other human rights for that matter. So based on this articulation of right to development, what framework, in my view, can be suitable? And in the interest of time, I would just like to focus on 2 aspects of this framework. One is the goal. What should be the goal of that we are trying to achieve here? The goal is often stated in terms of a just transition. And I think that goal is there, but my value addition will be in terms of trying to unpack some of the elements of this goal. Let me start with self-determination. If you look at the text of the 1986 Declaration, it is very clear that the people and the countries have right to exploit the natural resources. So that self-determination is very much there. At the same time, it will be unfortunate if developing countries who have a legitimate expectation in terms of right to development, they repeat the same mistakes that were made by developed countries, in my view, which was a model of exploitation of natural resources without any limit. And of course, they benefited historically from that particular model of development. So I guess the point is we should learn from the mistakes that were made by other countries in the past and try to develop an alternative model of development, which is in harmony with nature, which protects the planetary, which is operating within the planetary ecosystem. And with this in mind, I have articulated as part of my mandate a new model of development, which I'm calling planet-centered participatory model of development. I will not have the time to unpack this, but happy to engage later on. The second element, in my view, is that often we talk about that the fossil fuel is something we should phase out. We should not be using the fossil fuel. And I tend to agree with this from a climate change perspective. But at the same time, I also argue that millions of people in developing countries in the global south are relying on coal, for instance, to cook their food or to have access to energy, whether it's electricity or to heat up anything for that matter. So then they need alternatives, because if we just ban the non-renewable resources without providing alternatives, it's not going to work. It is going to result in violations of human rights of millions of people. And I think that is where international cooperation becomes crucial. So there is an obligation, in my view, on developed countries and the companies which have technologies to make available these alternative options, which would allow all of us, not just certain countries and some people, to move towards a just transition. At the same time, we also need to manage the impact on the workers. So if there are workers who have been working in these mining activities or other non-renewable resources, how do we provide an alternative source of livelihood for them? What about the impact of mining activities, whether renewable or non-renewable extraction, on the communities? Because there are a lot of issues about conflicts, a lot of issues about children getting exploited, sexual violence is there. So how do we ensure that the rights of communities, environment are protected in that particular process? And that is where the role of businesses, corporations become crucial. Now, this is unfolding in the context of European Union, and that's where the idea of a responsible business conduct, RBC, as it is known in Europe, becomes very crucial, because businesses have to respect labor rights, human rights, and the environment in the process of extracting those resources and making those facilities available to others. Now, let me also highlight here the element of the principle of CBDR, that is common but differentiated responsibilities. Of course, all communities, all countries have a collective common responsibility to mitigate against climate change, to adapt in view of the climate change. At the same time, we cannot expect the same obligations on developed countries and developing countries. And that's where, again, right to development brings this principle of common but differentiated responsibilities, which is quite critical in my view. And let me highlight the final element of this goal. And that final element, in my view, is we need a fair exploitation of natural resources. What do I mean by this? What I see is that the value that is generated by exploiting natural resources is not shared fairly between where those resources exist and who is exploiting them. And that is where the question is that who should get how much, where the value addition is created from that extraction. I think that has to be generated in a more fair manner. And currently, unfortunately, that is not happening. So let me conclude by moving towards the process. I articulated the goal and how right to development provides a pathway, in my view, to strike a balance between meeting the development aspirations, at the same time operating within the planetary boundaries. But the process is also important. It's not merely about the goal. And in terms of the process, again, right to development provides a crucial element because it highlights not consultation, but participation. People, all, individual as well as collectively, they should be able to participate. And that participation in the decision-making has to be active, free, and meaningful. These are three crucial words: active, free, and meaningful. So if people are able to participate, so whether we're talking about extraction of resources, or we're talking about a just transition or phasing out fossil fuel, participation is crucial. The process matters. And it is not merely consultation, a tick box, that after a decision has already been made, you're merely ticking the box for a legitimacy exercise. Rather, it is about a meaningful bottom-up process where people have agency and they are listened to. That matters. And the final issue about process, in my view, is intergenerational equity. We often talk about participation of people of present generations. But what about future generations? And as domestic principles on the human rights of future generations mentioned, as well as more recent, the Pact for the Future, it has a declaration. It talks about the needs and interests of the future generations. So in my view, any issue, any discussion about a just transition, or any discussion in this panel about how do we resolve this conflict between realizing development aspirations and to ensure that non-renewable resources are exploited, that balance cannot be struck merely by looking at the interests and the rights of the present generations. We have to consider the impact on future generations, whatever decisions we make today. And that's where law can come into picture by providing a pathway that they are representatives of future generations because they don't exist yet. So how do we ensure that the trustees and representatives of future generations are able to participate in the decision-making process? And I will extend that the future generations concept should not be limited to human beings, because we know for sure that there will be plants, there will be rivers, animals, and other living creatures on this planet in future as well. They are there now and future as well. And that's where I will conclude by reminding everyone that this idea that leave no one behind should not merely be limited to human beings. Because we do not have plants, animals, forest, and rivers, human beings cannot survive. So we have to develop that we maintain the there. Thank you very much for the opportunity. And if there are any questions, I'll be very happy to respond to those questions.
Thank you very much, Professor Deva. This was a very intriguing presentation, which opens a lot of issues. I will make an exception now and allow questions both from the public as well as from the panelists, since Professor Deva will have to leave. Anybody, any comments, any questions which you would like to put to Professor? We have a microphone there. Just raise your hand. No? Panelists? Yes, Sarah?
Hello. I would like to ask this question a bit more about the content of. Thank you for your talk. It was very interesting, and you opened really great perspectives how to think about development. But then I would like to ask, how much open is the content? Is it related also like? Is there any specific relation to the content that is just very open? Because on the one side you mentioned this non-renewable and renewable natural resources, but on the other side is like what? Is it aspiration? Is it good life? Is it desired change? Or is it really open to formulate it by participating? This is my question.
Thank you. Professor? Are you still with us? Oh, I hope we didn't lose him. Looking at the technical stuff, is he still online? Gone. Okay. Okay, then we have to debate this question, Sarah, later on as a group of panelists and move on. Okay, our next speaker, of course. Huh? He's back. Okay. We don't see him.
Apologies, I think my internet is a bit patchy.
Have you heard the question?
No, I think I got disconnected when the question was. No,
okay.
Please, if someone can repeat the question, please. Thank you.
I will ask Professor Lunaček to repeat it, please.
Thank you for your very interesting presentation that opens a good way to think about development. And I wanted to ask if, because on one side you mentioned renewable and non-renewable resources as something which is necessary in development, but actually it's very hard to define what development is. So do you leave it completely open to define it together with people participating in it, or there are some other concepts useful in this, like for example, good life, when we veer, degrowth, and this kind of issues, or is it completely open to each time formulated?
I think he is. Well, let's see.
Thank you very much for the question. I turned off my video, but I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, I turned off my video because the internet, it seems, is not great at my end. I think the concept of development is dynamic. It will keep evolving as per different generation. It is also local context specific. What it means in Slovenia will be very different from what it means in Uganda or somewhere else in Asia. So I think we need to keep those considerations in mind, but that there are basic conditions For instance, we need human dignity. So a dignified life should be available to every person everywhere. So that has to be definitely met by the right to development. Now, in terms of degrowth, in my view, the right to development as a concept can accommodate degrowth as well. In fact, I wrote a paper last year on this. But what I argued is that what degrowth means in Europe or countries which have developed will be very different from what degrowth should look like in countries which are still developing. So we cannot have a one-size-fits-all approach in terms of how we articulate this concept, or in particular context we do it. So I think those local context and variables will be relevant, but that is where the overarching principles will be key to articulate it. So we cannot articulate right to development in a way, in my view, that will destroy the planetary ecosystem. So we cannot merely focus on economic development, for instance. That will be not right to development. That could be economic development. That could be the model of growth based on GDP. But that's not what right to development is. We have to give focus on cultural development as well. What about political development? What is about social development? So I think it's a comprehensive concept. It is a holistic concept. It evolves as per the time. It has flexibility. It can accommodate degrowth as well. But the core idea is, again, human dignity. So how do we ensure that everyone everywhere has a dignified life? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for, first of all, interesting presentation and also your answer to this. We will have to let you go now and continue with our panel. So thanks again for joining us.
Thank you very much, and I wish you good luck with the panel and the conference. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
We have to move right on, and our oh, I'm sorry. I thought there was. I'm afraid I have let him go. I think by now he's gone. Yeah, sorry, I wasn't paying attention to. I thought that this was because before there were no questions from the. Okay, then we can discuss later with the other panelists as well. Okay, our next panelist is Judy Hofmeyr, who is a researcher and has a vast area of experience, from what I saw, moving from both academia to Southern African mining sector. Currently, as I understand, you're working as a researcher at African Policy Research Institute, as well as at Institute of Human Rights and Businesses. And you worked also as a mediator of mines and community disputes. So combining both academia and practice, which I assume gives you a good insight into the issues on the ground, as well as the academic approach to these issues. So my suggestion to you was to talk, first of all, a little bit about human rights in mining, but then also a question of what path of development should be the one followed by resource-rich African countries. Because as a professor, I always pointed out to the students that there's sometimes really this curse of having a lot of resources and then not being able to use them properly to promote the development. So Judy, please could you highlight some of the issues that you experienced in your life so far? Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Bučar, and thank you everyone for the opportunity to share some of these insights. I'm looking at my phone, but I'm not on TikTok. I'm just looking at my notes. So as Dr. Bučar has mentioned, I've started my career about a decade ago as a mediator, and that gave me a lot of contact with affected communities and a lot of time spent in field asking, what is your notion of justice? What do you want from this mine? Where do you want these negotiations to go? I then moved on as a management consultant and worked directly with the private sector on social issues and social performance. And then I moved into academia as a PhD researcher and now as a research fellow. So I have come to this issue from a lot of different perspectives, and you'll see that in the way that I approach these issues, I'm a mediator at heart, and I still always try to find a way to balance different interests and try to think of things from the other side. So I want to begin by saying that the relationship between extraction, mining, and development is, of course, a very, very complex one. Does extraction lead to development? Yes, it can. We know that. Does development, progress, anywhere in the world lead to more extraction to make more industrialized goods? Yes, it does. Can access to industrialized goods like information technology and transportation infrastructure and big housing developments, can that lead to more development? Yes, it can. But achieving these outcomes require managing deeply complex and often competing priorities. I love this quote from Anthony Bebbington, who's an academic but now runs the Ford Foundation's Resources Program, when he says, "Contentious and ambiguous, two words which describe the relationship between large-scale mining and development. Contentious, because mining has so often delivered adverse social, environmental, and economic effects for the many, but significant gains only for the few. And ambiguous, because of the abiding sense among local populations, as much as development professionals, that just maybe mining could do so much more." Some of the complexity arises from the fact that managing non-renewable resources is not merely a technical challenge. It is shaped by the global structure of power, by issues of trust, and by contested visions of development. Striking the right balance is extraordinarily difficult. So let's delve into the factors that need to inform that balance. So when I analyze issues in this field, I always emphasize that we need to think about scale. And I like that one of our previous panelists also evoked this lens. We need to delineate what happens at a local, national, regional, and global scale, and we need to investigate how interests at each of these scales impact development, sustainability, and also justice outcomes. This is especially important in the context of the energy transition and the surging demand for critical minerals. So let me explain what I mean. At a global scale, we have this climate emergency, and we desperately need the inputs to make green technologies. We've also seen, especially in this last year, that this drive to access critical minerals has shifted to be more motivated by geopolitical competition and national security concerns. So the demand for minerals is not going away. The need to mine is not going away anytime soon. Then at a national scale, you have African countries that are endowed with the minerals and in theory should be governing their extraction in a way that benefits the nation broadly. But what happens is that we often see that the developmental outcomes of mining manifest at a national level. So we can see improvements in fiscal income, foreign exchange earnings, and on top of that, it is very difficult to broaden the benefits and escape the extract and export model that has characterized African countries for centuries. Then on the African continent, also as our previous speaker has emphasized, we've got this big effort to act regionally. So there are regional interests, especially in alignment with the African mining vision's values or principles. And now more recently, the African Green Mineral Strategy. And this is important because that regional solidarity gives countries greater bargaining power, and combining local markets makes value addition so much easier. So there's also that pool of interests. But then at a local scale, you have the people, the communities who live near resource deposits, sometimes even on top of the resource deposit, in which case they are likely to be moved forcefully or by coercion. And then you have the industrial mine operator. And in Africa, these are mostly foreign companies whose interest is to add value in their own context and to extract profitably, which people would like to say is easy, the profits just flow from mining, but it is actually a very precarious industry and is dependent on a very precarious business, very precarious business conditions. However, what we need to realize when we talk about scale is despite all these interests in minerals, global, regional, all these different directions that we're pulled into, the costs of extraction, all of the costs of extraction are borne by the people who live near the mine. They may benefit, but all of the costs will be borne by them. And so from a justice perspective, that is something that we need to grapple with. And that is something that our mining codes and our collaborative partnerships need to grapple with. So when we talk about how mineral extraction should be governed, basically, this is the key, easier said than done. We need to protect the rights of people who live in close proximity to mines. We need to ensure that when we destabilize people and environments to access minerals, we do so in a way that provides a definitive developmental return, not just at the national level, but for impacted people too. But we need to do all of this in a way that doesn't threaten investor confidence, because we cannot realize the progress that we want without capital and without long-term collaborative partnerships. So let's unpack some of these priorities. Firstly, the first priority is protect the rights of people who live near mines. So when it comes to that priority, there is no shortage of frameworks. We saw some of them being discussed just now. There's voluntary frameworks, there's legal frameworks. Across Africa, many mining jurisdictions technically have some combination of constitutional protections, environmental impact assessment laws, social and labor plans, etc. in place. At the continental level, we've also got frameworks that emphasize community inclusion, environmental safeguards. From the investor side, especially European investors, we've seen an increased reliance on ESG standards, due diligence guidance, the UNGPs, and now the CSDDs, which codify some of these standards into law. And all of these frameworks place a duty on companies and financiers to identify, prevent, and remedy harms along their value chains. However, much of my research investigate why do these ideals not always translate into practice in the operational context, but more importantly, into tangible outcomes for affected people. And I want to say from the outset that I believe that these frameworks have played a really important role in shifting norms. And I also believe that responsible practices have largely improved. Although the improvement is not consistent across companies or across mining jurisdictions, the point is that the art of the possible has been illustrated. There are really encouraging case studies out there. And beyond corporate responsibility, look at what the mining industry has achieved when it comes to health and safety. When there is the right legal framework and the right intent, we can see significant progress. So I want to say that from the outset before I start with my critique. But that progress remains uneven, and there are several recurring reasons why. Firstly, the most obvious thing, in some cases, there is simply a lack of corporate intent. And we see this amongst operators from emerging economies sometimes, but I'm also concerned that we're about to enter an era of ESG fatigue, where the urgency of the critical minerals projects, combined with the shifting sentiment towards geopolitical national interest, may cause systemic deprioritization, especially with the urgency to start new mining projects, because mining projects take very long to develop, and that can sideline local interests. Second, many governments lack the capacity to monitor and enforce regulations, especially in remote mining locations. This challenge is also compounded by the fact that the interests of governments and mining companies are often in alignment, and it goes in the same direction. So that hampers the monitoring capacity. Third, there are enduring asymmetries between companies and communities that rarely get addressed. Access to information, access to tools to monitor the impact of mining or gather evidence to prove that you've been impacted, to prove your grievance, access to meeting space, to coordinate collective action. These are some of the asymmetries that we don't always realize need to be addressed. Fourth, there is still a CSR mindset that prioritizes risk as an outcome over justice, over true responsibility. Local communities are treated as stakeholders to be consulted rather than as rights holders whose lives are fundamentally reshaped by extraction. This framing limits the moral ambition of companies. Fifth, the operational complexity on the ground is real. I don't think we talk about this enough. As someone who had to advise private companies, I'm also very sympathetic because I also couldn't think of all the answers. And I often didn't have answers, even though my intent was to really get it right. Mining projects intersect with local histories, politics, traditional leadership, land disputes, and shifting social expectations. These dynamics are incredibly hard for even the most well-intentioned social teams to manage, and even harder to manage consistently over time. It is often really hard to know in this scenario in this context? What is the right thing to do? Finally, and linked to this, there's a chronic underfunding of the social function within companies. Teams responsible for engagement and social impact mitigation often operate with limited budgets, high staff turnover, and little influence over major project decisions. We haven't matched the complexity of mine communities, often consisting of hundreds of thousands of people, with the capacities of social teams, often consisting of only a handful of people. So, given that, what does this then mean for the developmental return that we need to solve for? So let me start with a simple premise. Mining is not sustainable, at least not in environmental terms. It is disruptive and finite by nature, but that does not mean it cannot play a broader role in a broader sustainable development trajectory. If governed wisely, mining can act as a catalyst, a mean to fund and build the foundations of an economy that looks very different from the one that required the mine in the first place. And this is the core ambition of regional frameworks like the African Mining Vision. They reject the old pit-to-port model, they look at value addition, and it's not just about mineral wealth, but it's also about energy access, because this type of industrialization, especially green industrialization, which would really be ideal, cannot happen without reliable, affordable power. And so this is a multi-generational ambition that we need to address on the continent, and those ambitions manifest at the national and the regional scale, but it must be anchored also in real near-term benefits at the local level. That means people who live near mines must be able to see and feel the benefits now through jobs, procurement, training, infrastructure, and services, and those benefits must be accessible. Too often I've seen projects where jobs are available, but locals are not hired. Procurement targets are set, but local businesses lack the capacity to meet them. The most responsible companies, and again, there are many out there, capacitate local people to take up these opportunities and co-create a time horizon for when benefits will become tangible. So finally, this is the difficult part. Priority number 3, investment. A lot of what I've said so far, protecting rights, delivering meaningful development, raising standards, inevitably means placing more obligations on companies or shrinking the slice of the pie they might otherwise claim. So how do we reconcile that with the need to attract investment? The answer lies in reframing what responsible investors are actually looking for. It's not just tax breaks and free permits. It's predictability, rule of law, and legitimacy. The Fraser Institute's investor survey consistently shows that political stability and regulatory certainty rank above fiscal incentives in driving investor decisions. I know that we are pressed for time, so I'm going to skip a few things, but I was really encouraged by what Ms. Kama also shared about the relationship that De Beers has with the Botswana government. Again, goes to show how important that long-term collaboration is. So to conclude, I think that where we go from here is that it is about finding the right partners that can support that vision and that can go beyond just scary narratives of risk and actually buy into the African vision of development and also local development. And I think these types of forums are really important, where we forge relationships, where we speak about what we need from each other. And then I think that we need to move from ideals and normative frameworks. So it's good to have these discussions and say all the aspirations that we have, but we have to move towards tangible, grounded practice. There's no shortage of principles, but what's missing is often the practical detail. What worked where, for whom and why, and how did teams, or how did we deal with trade-offs in the real world? And then we need to get better at documenting and learning from success. Too often we focus only on failures, on protests, shutdowns, broken promises, but there are stories out there of collaborations at work, of the developmental dial shifting, of companies listening, of rights being addressed, of court cases being one, of the legal framework moving forward. And it's very important that we tell those stories too and learn from them and see which parts of those are replicable. Thank you. I hope I didn't speak too long, but thank you.
Just a little bit. not endangering, yes. Thank you very much, Judy, for this combination of going through all the problems and the issues. And I think you open a lot of things to discuss later on when we open the floor to questions. And we will move right on to Professor Gavin Hilson, who is a professor of sustainability in business, deals with small-scale mining in developing countries. And we have discussed that he should address social and environmental impact of artisanal and small-scale mining. Sometimes in theory we talk about small always being beautiful, but I wonder whether this is really the case also in small-scale mining.
Oh, it's gorgeous.
It's gorgeous. Yeah. Okay, excellent. So you have the PowerPoint, or just use this one.
Okay. Hi. I've been summoned to talk to you about everyone's favorite subject, artisanal and small-scale mining. And I tried to make it a bit interesting because I've been asked to talk about the impacts of artisanal and small-scale mining, and I thought, what better way to make it interesting than to sort of make it about me? So that's what I'm going to do. What I try to do is address three interrelated questions when it comes to making sense of the environmental and social impacts of small mining. And I'm referring to Africa here, which is where I do almost all of my work. So I try to understand why this sector is persistently informal. And from there, I try to understand, well, what justification is there for formalizing this sector, to pumping funds into formalizing it? And what strategies can be employed to formalize ASM in sub-Saharan Africa? And the way I go about addressing those questions is through research in a number of countries. And I also work alongside governments, donors, and NGOs, because this provides a much-needed policy perspective to see where their thinking is. And obviously, they're the ones with the money and the drive and the ones that make the decisions. And it's this sort of issue that I've pretty much broached, which is the fact that most activity in this sector in Africa is informal, over 95% of it. So, when you get an image like this, it can really set off your media outlets, and they go crazy when they see these pictures, draw conclusions based on imagery. Government officials as well, they draw their own conclusions based on images like this. And it's a really tough sell when you go to these government officials and donors and NGOs and say, well, this is a sector that contributes a lot to the local economy, et cetera, because when you see images like this, they're quite powerful. So let's take a look at the good, the bad, and the ugly. And the bad is that, well, look, it's persistently informal, so these people are unregulated and unmonitored. They're not exactly shining stars when it comes to health and safety. There's numerous social ills in these unregulated communities, lots of disease, prostitution, drug consumption, and they're not exactly implementing ISO 14001. There's a lot of environmental degradation, land destruction, mercury pollution in the case of gold mining. But I think these bads and these images, they really sort of overshadow the goods, because even in its predominantly informal state, we're talking about a sector that is the most important rural non-farm sector in Africa. We don't know the exact numbers, but at least 25 to 30 million. I mean, we could be talking about 15 million alone in the DRC, okay? But here's a table with estimates. I have no clue how we got these numbers, but you can see that there's a lot of people that are dependent upon this sector for their livelihoods, direct employment. It dovetails agriculture. I mean, a lot of these people, when they're not mining, they're farming, and when they're not farming, they're mining, so they're interconnected. So you see a lot of people in many parts of Africa where, for example, fertilizers are no longer subsidized by the state. They're using money from gold mining to buy those fertilizers to eat, basically, to sustain their farms. And it creates income earning opportunities for many millions of others. So when we're talking about the Minamata Convention on Mercury, and we're talking about eradicating mercury, we're talking about all these environmental and health directives that are spearheaded by donors, I mean, what we don't seem to recognize is that this is an ecosystem, and it's not just the miners you're affecting, it's the many millions of others that you're impacting, their livelihoods. So just take sort of a cross-section of a small-scale gold mining community, and you're talking about, not only the people working directly at the site, but you're talking about skilled employment, and you're talking about all those other sort of ancillary industries that emerge on the back of small mining. So there's millions of people that are connected to this sector in one way or the other. And so the ugly is that, in my view, this informality is created by policy. And it's very obvious when you sort of dissect what's going on policy-wise in most African countries. There really is no incentive to get a license. So there's no incentive to formalize. So if we're going to these international conferences talking about the sector being predominantly poverty-driven, populated by people who have nothing else to do, but you're charging them $10,000 for a license. It doesn't really make any sense. And then the applications to get these licenses and permits, they're just impossible to navigate. There's just so many steps involved. And before you even kickstart a process, you have to bribe a whole bunch of people. These things obviously aren't on the record, but you have to bribe landowners, even though they're not part of the process, local leaders, et cetera, et cetera. And even the most dedicated of people, they end up getting to the stage where it's time to award their license, but there's no land left. And you look at the concessions, and this is all, large-scale mining and predominantly mineral exploration activity, and there's a rent-seeking culture behind this because governments get, $10,000, $20,000 a pop for a 2 to 3 year exploration lease. There's 200 to 300 exploration leases that are active at any given time. So there's millions of dollars at stake here for just basically awarding a license to a junior mining company from Toronto for 2 years. So in many cases, a lot of the lands or the areas that are suitable for small-scale mining that large-scale miners will never touch and could never mine economically. We got to remember that in the case of gold mining, in most countries, less than 1% of exploration projects become mines. Those parts of those geological deposits are demarcated rather carelessly as part of mineral exploration concessions. So it's impossible for these people to secure licenses. And all the data are online. This is Mozambique. I mean, this is Zambia here. I'll show you Zambia. Oh, sorry, I've gone forward. Where is it here? Okay, like if you look at Zambia, apparently this map is outdated. Like 85% of the country is under concession to mining and mineral exploration countries. This is a very extreme case. It's like people's houses probably, man, are part of a concession. So beware, So that's Mozambique, that's DRC, but the list goes on. So the question is, where do we go from here? And that's what I'm trying to make sense of now. And I always get this question, because I've been looking at this small-scale mining, doing research in African ASM communities for 25 years. I know I look young, but 25 years. Is there a best practice? I always get this question, okay, and I'm like, man, I'm an academic. I'm not good at coming up with answers, man. I'm good at telling you what the problem is. But anyway, is there a best practice formalization model? And I started off when I was like, 20 years ago, when I had energy. I was like, no. And then that sort of shifted to not really about 10 years ago when I started losing energy. And now I have absolutely no energy. So I'm like, all right, maybe. So let me try to make sense of what a best practice formalization model would look like in Africa, okay? And that's where I am right now. So first of all, let's try to understand what formalization means in the context of ASM. It's first of all, you have people saying, and this really annoys me, that formalization of ASM is not effective, that we need to move on. Well, we haven't formalized anything, so how do we know if it's effective or not? The problem is, though, that everything revolves around formalization. So the World Bank's pumping millions of dollars into formalizing ASM in Tanzania, in Ghana, in Burkina Faso, the list goes on. So whether we like it or not, it's here to stay. Because all technical assistance for ASM revolves around this theme. That's sort of part of these donor projects for mining and in some cases standalone ASM technical assistance projects. So we understand what it means. It's a process, but we don't know how to achieve it, okay? And that's where I'm trying to sort of make sense of things here, okay? But it first starts with sort of recognizing that it's not a case, as I've indicated, of formalization not being effective. It's perhaps the processes that we're following to achieve formalization that are not effective. And once we accept that, well, then we can sort of, you know, understand that there's some architecture in place, and let's interrogate that architecture. And recognize that, okay, hey, formalization is, in this context, a process. It starts with licensing, okay? And that licensing, in theory, should catalyze access to finance, access to improved technology, create opportunities for investment, enable miners to scale up, and also, most importantly, provide these miners with security of tenure, because it's pointless going through this process unless you have security of tenure, some guarantee that you're allowed to mine in that area for 10 years, not like 1 year and then some mining company comes along and says, all right, man, you got to move. They want to know that they have security of tenure, okay? So let's quickly go through this, focusing on sub-Saharan Africa, all right? So what are the key ingredients for ASM formalization? And let's sort of articulate some of the models that can be implemented in various parts of the region. And I think this is another part of it, because alongside this, we have to make sure that we sort out the large-scale mining sector. And I'm going to get to this topic, autonomous coexistence, and touch on it very briefly towards the end. And then the next steps, if you as a country want to pursue this goal of formalization seriously. So let's make sense of it. Like, so when you sort of go through all the different strategies that have been pursued across the region to achieve formalization of ASM, you recognize, or you should recognize, that there's no silver bullet. And this is the problem. We seem to think that, you know, what works in Ghana will work in Mozambique, and that's not the case. Why? Because the governance systems are different, the climates are different, the minerals are different, the accessibility to these minerals are different. Some of these places are war zones. It's very difficult to formalize in a war zone. And just assumption, moving away from like what works in one country may not work in another country, but may work in another country if it's tweaked slightly. So if we go in with that approach, I think that's an important start. And recognizing that there is no one dominant attribute. So when people ask me, well, what's the best practice, Gavin, for sub-Saharan Africa? Well, there is no one dominant attribute. There are some overlaps. So let's take a look at some of those overlaps, from which I've identified some key criteria. First of all, you know, you got to have the geology. You can't it may sound funny, but you can't formalize any ASM unless there's gold there, unless there's diamonds there. And this is quite cruelly has happened a lot of times, that miners have formalized and then there's no gold there. Separate policy and legal treatment. It's very important that you have separate policies and regulations for ASM, okay? A lot of countries don't. You have to have institutional buy-in. I always say that, look, this is an important starting point, is when you have a discussion about ASM in your ministries, that it's not just the dude from the geology department and someone from the mines department, that there's someone there from the agricultural ministry and someone there from the gender ministry. It's a livelihoods issue, not a mining issue, and I think that's a crucial starting point. There's decentralized execution. It shouldn't be only the people in the capital cities making the decision, but it should be the people who are actually in the field, working for government, that are contributing to those decisions. User-friendly licensing and permitting. Let's not charge them $10,000 a license for a license. Let's make it more user-friendly and give them an incentive to actually engage in formalization. And of course, security of tenure, as I mentioned. Do they see a path from application to outcome? Like, can they see the light at the end of the tunnel? Prospective applicants. Have you demarcated areas that are suitable for ASM and put them aside? A lot of countries in Africa have provision to do this, yet many aren't doing it. And government commitment beyond rhetoric. It's one thing saying before the election that when you get into power that you're going to formalize ASM, and then once you get into power, you send the military in to shoot everyone, right? Then active partnership building and capacity building. So at sort of the end of this process, is there opportunity for these groups of miners to partner with an NGO, or is there scope for doing that? Is there potential for doing that? And when you sort of break all that down, I've come up with these 4 models, and you can sort of, some have good parts, some have bad parts, and if you sort of look at these 4 models across Africa, you can draw from them. So the first model is this decentralized model. So in Mali, you have this fully decentralized model, where no one in the central government is involved. It's all demarcated to the circle and prefecture level. The mayors are involved. There's designated corridors for miners to mine. The only thing is they can't use machines, so they're prevented from scaling up. So this is the an example of the fully decentralized model in sub-Saharan Africa. Then you have the hybrid model, where you have, moving away from Mali, you have both central and local government input. So Tanzania made the important move from moving it from a sort of centralized control of ASM policymaking and regulation to some decentralized input where local government could actually make a decision on licenses. Then in places like Sierra Leone and Liberia, you have specific licenses, the most artisanal type of license that are fully sort of managed and decided upon by the local government offices. And central government oversight is there, but it's not like sort of like fully there, if you know what I'm saying. Then you have the corridor blocking out model, where in theory it's geologically led. So if you take the approach, like in the case of gold mining, that only small-scale gold miners are only going to target shallow hard rock deposits or alluvial deposits. These are deposits that mining companies aren't interested in. You block them out, and you use that sort of as a basis for formalizing. And they're doing that in theory, in Mozambique, in the Congo, in Mali to some extent, but these are examples of where this is actually sort of, there's a bit of life cycle thinking here. So we're going to look at these exploration companies that are coming in. Any alluvial deposits they identify, we're going to block those areas out for small-scale mining for a rainy day type of thing. And then you have, I didn't know what to name this. I know it sounds like the name of a DJ, starting from scratch. But yeah, this is literally starting from scratch. So in Ghana, they started from scratch. So they actually looked at the situation and said, we got to stop smuggling here from ASM. We're going to implement all these laws. We're going to assign various ministries, various tasks with the goal of formalizing and supporting the sector. And they've done it in Zambia recently. And if they can do it in Zambia, I think they can do it anywhere. And the reason why I say that is no one is looking at gold and interested in gold in Zambia. There's zero policy interest in Zambia in gold until recently. It's a copper-producing nation. They're interested in copper. The fixation is on copper. The resource curse is about copper and to some extent gemstones. So if they can do this for gold in Zambia, I'm sure they can do it for other types of minerals and gold in other countries where small-scale mining of that particular mineral, in this case gold, is the focus. So they've done it in Zambia. I've written a piece on this. I'm not sort of trying to recite my CV here, but anyway, I've called it the Zambia model because it is really, really inspirational. So going back to these criteria, and we're going to sort of map these criteria on this table here, and this is sort of the paper I haven't written yet, but you can kind of see how there's a lot of good stuff going on and good stuff associated with specific models as revealed in particular case study countries, okay? So I think this is sort of where I want to leave you with this sort of thought here, is that in order for this to happen, there needs to be a lot done in the exploration space, the large-scale exploration space. And what makes me quite angry is there's this fixation in donor circles and industry circles that small-scale miners and large-scale miners want to be friends. I'm serious, that we can partner together. They don't like each other. And I think once we recognize this, we can move things forward. And the way you address this simultaneously with formalizing ASM is creating a space for that formalization. And how do you do it? You address the large-scale exploration phase of large-scale mining. You adopt this life cycle thinking. You accept the fact that these are two very different entities, small-scale mining and large-scale mining, who don't like each other, don't care for each other, and don't want to see each other at the bar. And that large-scale miners are not a stakeholder of small-scale mining, that they become a stakeholder of small-scale mining because of bad policy, okay? And the way you sort of pursue this is, as I've indicated, with the blocked-out model, is you facilitate access to lands that contain those alluvial and shallow hard rock deposits. Don't make it a problem later on. Don't make it a problem for the mining company, so you have to approach them to release their land. Because we got to remember that a large-scale mining company is an amorphous body. It has subsidiaries that are owned by other people that are headquartered in the Cayman Islands, that are owned by someone else, that's owned by someone's dad, right? So that's how it works. And they don't want to have anything to do with small-scale mining. You look at these companies, and they identify small-scale mining in most cases. I don't want to name drop here, but I will. The likes of Goldfields, AngloGold Ashanti, Barrick Gold. On their websites, they identify ASM as the #1 risk to their operations. And we just don't know who owns the company today and tomorrow. Who would have forecasted Barrick swooping in and buying up Randgold? So when you have those mergers and acquisitions, there's tens of thousands every year. What works one year won't work the next year. So sitting there and not doing anything, exercising this live and let live model when it comes to dealing with small miners on your concessions isn't a strategy. It's not a best practice strategy because it becomes someone else's problem, in most cases the companies later on. Okay, so let's address this at the exploration phase and make these models a possibility. So let me wrap up with this. Next steps, this should be the priority. If you're keen to formalize as a country and you're serious about ASM formalization, this should be the priority, sorting out this large-scale exploration phase, making it a possibility. Identify your geological foundation, commit to pinpointing those deposits that are capable of supporting small-scale mining in a formalized state. Review your laws. Are your licenses operator-friendly? In most cases, they're not. And lastly, have a conversation with the miners, man. They want to talk to you. And that's it. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I think this was a very comprehensive overview of small-scale mining, which raised a lot of questions, and I bet the public will put them to you after we complete the panel. We move right on. This time we will discuss an important role of women in development. Women in development play, I think, increasingly important role, always have. But what I would like to ask Ms. Balbine, Pascaline Makani Omguba, I hope I pronounced it correctly, is to share with us her views of the role of women in mining industry. We know that here this is a new field and a very important one, so please take the floor now and share with us some of your thoughts.
Thank you very much. I will do my presentation in French. It will be more easier for me. Merci beaucoup de l'opportunité qui nous est donnée de parler du rôle des femmes. Mais je voudrais, avant toute chose, ne pas seulement parler du rôle, parce qu'il faudrait aussi également que nous sachions qu'il y a eu une certaine évolution depuis le temps. C'est parce que quand on parle de rôle, ce rôle-là a été évolutif. Depuis des décennies, les femmes sont impliquées dans l'activité comme les hommes, nous le savons tous. Mais est-ce que ces femmes-là sont restées, est-ce que ça n'a pas été dynamique? Est-ce que ça a évolué? Et si ça a évolué, quels ont été les défis, la situation actuelle et qu'est-ce que nous entrevoyons pour l'avenir? Dans ce sens-là, nous savons tous, on ne va pas le répéter, ça a déjà été dit maintes fois, que la mine, la plupart du temps, est réservée pour les hommes. Donc, on le sait. Mais il faudrait également aussi dire que les femmes sont partie prenante de cette activité. Mais ce que nous constatons, c'est que les rôles et responsabilités des uns et des autres sont différents. Donc, nous, en tant que femmes qui impliquées dans le secteur minier, nous nous sommes rendus compte qu'il y avait d'abord plusieurs catégories de femmes qui étaient impliquées dans cette activité. Le professeur venait de parler de l'artisanat minier. Et on s'est rendu compte que cette activité-là est la plupart du temps pratiquée par les femmes qui peuvent être, par rapport au pays, on peut avoir 10% et ailleurs même atteindre plus de 50% de femmes qui sont impliquées dans cette activité minière artisanale. Mais ces femmes-là, qu'est-ce qu'elles font concrètement? Puisque nous parlons des rôles, ce sont des femmes qui dans la plupart des cas, sont dans toute la chaîne de valeur. Donc, depuis l'exploration jusqu'à la restauration des sites parfois. Donc, c'est les femmes qui peuvent être que produits, elles peuvent également transformer. Nous avons beaucoup de femmes qui sont impliquées dans la chaîne de gémologie, dans les métaux précieux avec l'or, qui font dans les bijouteries. Nous avons aussi des femmes qui sont dans la production des minéraux critiques, comme tout le monde les appelle maintenant. Et ça, c'est seulement la partie qui concerne les MAP, dont l'ASM. Si nous prenons l'autre deuxième catégorie de femmes, ce sont les femmes professionnelles, celles qui travaillent dans les compagnies minières qui sont agréées, reconnues, qui sont des multinationales. Ce sont des femmes qui peuvent avoir plusieurs casquettes parce que ce que nous disons la plupart du temps, que la femme du secteur minier est une femme qui peut être, je vais dire économiste, pas déjà technicienne, mais qui peut être aussi géologue, ingénieur de mine. C'est une femme qui peut faire dans l'environnement et parfois même être juriste, parce que la mine, c'est une chaîne de valeur où tout le monde peut intervenir. Donc, ce sont ces femmes-là. Et si on regarde le pourcentage par rapport aux données que nous avons, ce sont les femmes qui, en Afrique actuellement, où on a moins entre 15 et 20% de femmes impliquées. Donc, et maintenant, la troisième catégorie qui est celle des femmes entrepreneurs, qui s'essayent dans la chaîne de valeur, qui ont soit des droits miniers, ce sont des femmes qui ont eu la chance peut-être d'avoir un droit minier, qui peuvent produire, on en a certains, mais on trouve aussi les femmes dans la sous-traitance minière. La plupart du temps, elles sous-traitent, ça peut être dans l'alimentation, ça peut être dans d'autres activités qui ne sont pas toujours bien détaillées. Donc, nous, la plus grande, la quatrième catégorie de femmes, et celle dont je crois qu'on devait de plus en plus prendre compte, c'est les femmes des communautés, celles qui sont impactées par l'activité minière. Et ces femmes-là, ce sont des femmes, la plupart du temps, qui sont analphabètes, qui ne sont pas renseignées par rapport à ce qui se passe dans la communauté. Un matin, elles sont peut-être au champ et directement, elles voient les engins qui entrent dans les sites. Elles ne sont pas au courant de ce qui se passe parce que l'information n'a pas été relayée. Et ces femmes-là, comme elles ne sont pas bien instruites, elles ne peuvent pas discuter, donc elles ne peuvent pas, quand il est question du contenu local, de parler pour elles et de savoir ce qu'elles pourraient gagner de l'activité minière artisanale. Ce sont celles qui, la plupart du temps, seront plus impactées par cette activité-là, parce que quand il y aura des questions environnementales, qu'il y aura des problèmes de santé et de sécurité au niveau des villages, s'il y a peut-être pollution, c'est elles qui seront le plus impactées. Ces femmes-là, c'est notre quatrième catégorie de femmes. Donc, les chiffres que nous avions parlé de entre 40 et 50% des femmes de l'EMAP, 20% des femmes qui sont dans le domaine professionnel, quelques femmes seulement, moins de 10% qui sont entrepreneurs. Nous nous rendons compte que la mine, l'industrie minière continue à être dominée par les hommes et que ce déséquilibre-là est un déséquilibre qui ne fait pas avancer la diversité de genre et qui n'est pas très inclusif pour les femmes. Donc je crois que si nous voulons, avec la vision minière africaine ou l'agenda 2063, faire bénéficier la mine à toutes nos populations, il faudrait vraiment déjà que les questions d'inclusion, de diversité et de plus d'implication des femmes soient revues et mises à l'ordre du jour. Mais vous savez, quand on finit de plaindre ce tableau, on se dirait que tout est que mauvais. Mais comme je l'ai dit à l'entame de mon propos, il n'est pas seulement mauvais que les femmes bénéficient également. Il y a certes des défis, mais c'est une activité comme une autre qui mérite d'être encadrée, comme l'a dit mon prédécesseur. Donc, nous, on s'est dit qu'il y a beaucoup de défis et ces défis-là, on voudrait les surligner. Les défis, c'est quoi? Pourquoi est-ce que les femmes continuent à être en marge de l'activité minière industrielle? Pourquoi est-ce que les femmes ne profitent pas davantage de cette activité? C'est parce qu'il y a toujours les normes sociétales, c'est-à-dire culturelles. Les femmes ne peuvent pas facilement intégrer les sphères de l'industrie, parce que si on prend peut-être le cas des MAP, ce sont les femmes la plupart du temps qui, on va vous dire qu'une femme n'a pas le droit d'aller à la mine parce qu'elle est peut-être en période menstruelle, une femme n'a pas le droit d'aller à la mine parce qu'elle n'a pas eu l'autorisation de son mari, une femme, et tout ça là fait à ce qu'elles ne peuvent pas exprimer leur plein potentiel. Il y a également aussi les préoccupations de santé et de sécurité. Vous-même, vous savez que la mine est une activité la plupart du temps dangereuse et peut être polluante. J'ai une petite histoire, il y a peut-être un mois où j'étais en train d'avoir une conversation, comment est-ce que l'activité minière artisanale pourrait plus profiter, je sors du Cameroun, aux femmes du Cameroun, et il y a un monsieur même qui travaille dans l'administration camerounaise au niveau du SMIC, qui m'a demandé est-ce que les femmes doivent aller dans le secteur. Lui, en tant qu'homme, ne permettrait pas qu'une femme aille dans la mine. Donc, je me suis dit que, est-ce qu'il n'est pas, je lui ai répondu jusqu'il était, je crois que le plus important, c'est une activité. Ce que nous devons faire, c'est rendre cette activité décente pour que ce soit un travail décent, qu'il soit mieux encadré, pour que si une femme a choisi d'être artisane minière, qu'elle fasse son travail sans qu'il y ait des préoccupations et qu'elle ne soit pas peut-être exposée à l'utilisation du mercure, qu'elle n'amène pas les enfants dans les sites, on peut mieux encadrer ce type d'activité. Et comme je l'ai dit, il y a aussi cette question d'éducation. La plupart du temps, si on regarde même les femmes professionnelles, la mine produit les emplois qui ne sont pas pour les femmes. Et la plupart du temps, on va vous dire, il y a encore des lois actuellement qui disent que les femmes ne doivent pas descendre dans les mines souterraines. Donc, s'il y a déjà ce genre de barrière, comment est-ce qu'elles pourraient prendre avantage de ça? Donc, c'est une problématique qu'il faudrait regarder. Il y a également aussi le fait de l'analphabétisme des communautés qui ne prennent pas avantage de cette activité. Il est également aussi question d'envoyer nos jeunes filles, de sensibiliser pour que les jeunes filles fassent les sciences. Je crois qu'il y a déjà certains pays et certaines communautés où les sociétés minières industrielles encouragent davantage les jeunes filles même de communautés à faire des carrières dans le secteur minier, parce que la plupart du temps, vous arrivez dans une communauté, les filles veulent devenir institutrices que d'aller travailler dans la mine et profiter de la mine qui est de leur localité. Donc, je crois que pour moi, c'est des questions qu'il faudrait approfondir davantage, et il ne faudrait pas oublier l'éternelle question de l'équilibre entre la vie professionnelle et la vie de famille. Parce que vous savez, la mine, ce n'est pas en ville. La mine, c'est dans les localités éloignées, et les femmes ont des difficultés à quitter les foyers, ou si elles ont des préoccupations en ce qui concerne leur famille. Donc, je crois que dans ce sens-là, beaucoup de choses doivent être faites pour que ces petites apesanteurs soient réglées. Donc, nous disons que oui, il y a eu des défis, mais également aussi, nous pensons que beaucoup de choses ont été faites depuis le temps et qu'il y a des avancées. Si on regarde peut-être dans le cadre de la réglementation, donc les lois de plus en plus ont promotent vraiment que les femmes puissent s'impliquer davantage. Et il y a des pays où, avant, je crois que c'était peut-être en Afrique du Sud seulement, mais maintenant, la majorité des pays de l'Afrique de l'Ouest, vous verrez qu'il y a des dispositions où on vous dit que les femmes doivent bénéficier. Nous avions eu la voix de Madagascar, c'est la même chose. De plus en plus, il est prévu dans le contenu local que les femmes davantage devraient bénéficier de la mine. Il y a aussi cette question de comment est-ce qu'on renforce les capacités des femmes. On ne va pas toujours dire que les femmes sont analphabètes, peut-être 10 ans après, on vient toujours dire les mêmes choses. On se dit que ça devrait, les États, les gouvernements et surtout aussi d'autres organisations devraient vraiment prendre ça à bras le corps, renforcer les capacités des femmes. Si vous avez des femmes qui font dans l'or et elles ne savent même pas lire la balance, comment est-ce qu'elles vont pouvoir avoir un business ou avoir une activité qui puisse leur produire si elles sont trompées tous les jours? Donc, je me dis que ne serait-ce que les petites bases pour que les gens apprennent à lire et à écrire devraient être faits. Donc, il y a également aussi les structures, comme certaines compagnies minières qui mettent en place beaucoup de solutions. Mais je voudrais parler ici des associations de femmes du secteur minier en Afrique. Il y a tout un vaste réseau qu'on appelle l'association, le Women in Mining Association of Africa, AWIMA, et son réseau, qui travaille inlassamment pour que les femmes soient mieux reconnues, que les femmes soient célébrées, qu'elles puissent prendre avantage, que les chaînes de valeur soient mises en place. Et je pense pour ma part que c'est un travail qui pourrait à terme aboutir aux résultats que nous voulons. Je vois que nous courons après le temps, je ne voudrais pas être très longue et finir en disant que il y a beaucoup de choses qui arrivent. On parle des minéraux critiques, tout le monde parle que de ça, on parle de la transition énergétique, mais je ne vois pas ce qui a changé. Et il faudrait qu'on puisse vraiment, pour que nous puissions prendre avantage de tout ça, travailler dans le sens que les femmes puissent être au centre. Et qu'est-ce qu'on peut faire? Je pense pour ma part qu'il faudrait déjà documenter le travail que les femmes font, parce que ce travail n'est pas documenté et les cadres juridiques doivent davantage être renforcés. On a dit que les lois existent, il faut maintenant l'implémentation, parce que ça peut exister, on n'applique pas, et le contenu local doit pouvoir permettre aux femmes d'avoir les opportunités. Comme j'ai parlé, il y a des chaînes de valeur, comme la chaîne de la gémologie, on a d'autres chaînes de valeur où les femmes peuvent s'installer sans pour autant subir la pénibilité du travail. Il y a les rôles qu'il faut reconnaître, il faut éduquer, il y a maintenant l'intelligence artificielle qui arrive. Je me demande comment est-ce qu'on va faire si davantage on n'a pas pu avoir d'autres choses. Il faudrait qu'on voit, on a parlé de la formalisation de l'ASM, les femmes sont à 40%, qu'on encourage cette formalisation et que vraiment qu'on sensibilise nos hommes et peut-être nos leaders pour que les pratiques discriminatoires en matière d'emploi et l'accès au renforcement des capacités des femmes soient effectifs. Je vous remercie. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. I think this was an important topic to be discussed, to be touched and highlighted. And I'm particularly pleased that you said that there are still lots of problems, but that there are also examples of good practices. So I think we should return to that when, in our discussion following all the panelists. Last but not least important is the presentation by professor from Faculty of Arts of University of Ljubljana, who has a very interesting case study on Niger, where she explored the combination of traditional mobile pastoralism and the mining. The mining being something which is advocated by the government, if I read correctly your case study, and something which is promising a growth for the country, but on the other hand, it may be endangering the traditional activity of the people there. So Professor Lunaček, please.
So I will speak about the sustainability of mobile pastoralism. I will use this expression mobile pastoralist, maybe sometimes nomads, but mobile pastoralism is more correct now, facing the uranium mining in particular project, despite there are cases of other mining cases in Niger. In particular regarding the northern Niger. This is like this kind of order of things, and at the end I will address how to guarantee the rights, or how to try to guarantee the rights of mobile pastoralists. So I will relate a lot to actually yours topic. So there are, first let me start with misconceptions about mobile pastoralism, because it was kind of falsely understood as a degrading environment with overgrazing. This is already overcome for quite some time, but I need to mention it. Also, it's not outdated or less productive as it was thought, because this was mainly done in the 70s in the East African context, where the ranches were imposed and there was not enough land, and this was the consequence, the overgrazing. Where there is not enough land, the overgrazing appears logically. So all these, Simplici and Rogers, they found a nice expression, said that this biased approach to mobile mobile pastoralism when the sedentism is meant as something which is a norm and mobility exceptions, while we can turn this around and look at the mobility as a norm. So mobile pastoralism can be seen as sustainable, what particularly Schoons and Kratley were promoting. They developed this notion of living off uncertainty. So not only that it's just coping strategy, the mobility, but it's also using variability in rainfall and pasture in order to move to the best pasture. So this is something that Saverio Kratley is highly promoting, and this is kind of working with the nature approach, where herders are those who are mediating between the landscape and the weather and the herds. So they are cooperating with herds. In this way, they can also be supportive to biodiversity if the mobility is possible. So in this way, we can see that actually mobile pastoralism could be very well adapted even to climate change if the mobility is possible. Because even the herders, for example, in Niger, where there is a lot of drylands and deserts, even those who want ranches and use fodder, they cannot survive, their herds cannot survive without mobility. So the mobility is a very important feature, but of course it is limited. We will come back to the obstacles to mobility. In Niger, there are many diverse pastoral mobility systems. They were in the past and they are changing, as we will see. But what is common to all of them is that there is a season, the rainy season usually, where people are moving to the best pastures, sometimes in the north, sometimes in the east, it depends on the region. And it is also moving to the south during the dry months because the north is drier. In the past, this was together with the harvest time, when the harvest time was finished, so that they could use the residues on the fields, and in this way also to enrich the fields by the presence of animals. So this was kind of a win-win system between agriculturalists and pastoralists. I hope it was understandable what I wanted to say. Yeah, there are just some pictures so that you can see all this, they have some impressions about the diversity. Either the whole family moves, or women stay with goats, move in the smaller area, and the men went to the caravans. These things are of course changing. There are many different adaptations. I just mentioned some here. Like because of lack of mobility, some people are deciding to produce some fodder by themselves, and there is more direction to destocking and restocking the herds. Schooling is much greater than it used to be. People are leaving their nomadic camps and sometimes coming back to have herds. There are also some technical innovations that I see as a desired changes in development, like wells with solar panels, or some advantages in how to extract the water. So there are small innovations that can improve life conditions that are kind of true development as seen from the people perspective, and many others. So in the past, the one S is missing, a pastoral zone. It is the one region was where it was less than 300 millimeters per year precipitation. It was designed as a pastoral zone already in colonial times and reaffirmed after the independence till now, even in the now pastoral law. However, this limit is broken because because of the growth of the population, people need more fields, so they move up. And also, as I said, pastoralists themselves, they make herds. So also, as I mentioned, the limited residues are stopping the mobility to the south. There are new fields from the pastoralists and from the agriculturalists. There are some people closing land for ranches. There are new villages. There are more extreme climate events, and there is insecurity because of different jihadist groups. But what I would focus here finally is that a lot of interest is for different types of mining, either artisanal mining, small-scale mining, or the huge uranium projects, and also petrol extraction. So here, just to have an impression, all these yellow things are already like salt. Most of the territory is not, I mean, salt in brackets, but a lot of territory is designed for different mining activities, although in practice it's not as dramatic as in theory, particularly now after coup d'etat in the military government, they mainly chased away a lot of companies. So now this yellow is gold, brown is oil, and only the violet and red is uranium. And these red ones are the active mines, one kind of closing and the other opening. So it's not as in, for example, Mongolia or in some other places. So Niger used to be like the fourth stronger provider of uranium. Now, of course, for many years is Kazakhstan, who is the leading one. And Niger is now on the 7th place. In 2002, I was checking yesterday. So the mines from the 70s, the French mines are present. There was brief activity of not closed totally Chinese mine, which caused a lot of pollution because it didn't respect the basic measures of evaporation ponds. And then a new mine opened in 2002 by the Global Atomic, and actually at the moment it seems to be the only active one. So you can see that this is quite brutal activity that changes a lot the landscape, and uranium, we know that it's even more complicated regarding the pollution effect. So consequences of mining, just briefly, it occupies the land, no, as any land grabbing and extractivist activity. Also, it occupies the important seasonal pastures. Here you see these dark green arrows. This is the mobility arrows for the summer pasture. And in the same area, it's also Timber Soy Basin with a lot of uranium. So there is this strange strategy of the state to issue mining permits in the same area. It's not very strategically, I would say, compatible. And then what happens also, some wells are appropriated by different mines, and the water in the wells, the water level is going down, which is everywhere, no? Also in Mongolia and in Niger. And the water could be polluted, not necessarily, but it could happen. And radioactive dust of the tailings that, for example, French mines left outside are spreading with the strong Saharan winds. And also when Cominac was closed, the mine, they also didn't close it properly. So it doesn't help that the military chased away the French companies before they closed it properly. So also the water is used, a lot of this water is fossil water, which is not refilled. So there is a lot of problems. So there are some promises, like revenues for the budget, which was not very huge from the mining, like between 4 and 7%. The jobs that are mainly not from your levels that you mentioned, no, is very important. They are important from the wider region, but not for the locals, because very few locals get the jobs. The work itself can be quite dangerous, even if all the conditions for the security of health are taken, still it is dangerous. And yeah, for the nomads, there are basically almost no jobs. And these corporate social responsibility funds are kind of more like a kind of bribe, you know, we will build you one school class and that's it. And really giving little back regarding what people lose and what danger they are in, particularly with uranium. So how to guarantee continuation of mobile pastoralism and rights of mobile pastoralists in this kind of circumstances? It is clear that herders would be better off without mining, also the gardeners. And at some point, the regional council proposed to completely stop mining, but they didn't dare to really do it. They still put it in their development plan because it's still something where some revenue, like 15% of what state would get, not would be theirs. But the state is very strong on the wanting mines, no? Despite now all the partners are gone, but basically they want to exploit this. And how when there is no consent with the state that maybe they do not want to engage in mining, which is very rare, what can help? So you also mentioned environmental and social impact assessment, which was already in the 90s in the law, but a bit more precisely in the environmental law from 2018. There is also a pastoral code that claims the right to mobility to mobile pastoralists, and there is mining code that claims the right of the state to mine because it's their property, now this land. So they have all these not really completely overlapping laws, and this environmental and social impact assessment, the problem, as in many other cases, is that it's a kind of box tickling experience or a task where they don't really talk to everybody. They make seem that they talk to everybody, but they do not, particularly not with the nomads, and nomads are not informed about the consequences. So who really represents the pastoralist in a way, they're at the end, to make it short, it's not traditional authorities or regional authorities, but mostly civil society that took the case to the court and got a little bit better than environmental and social impact assessment. But this case is still going on with the latest mine. So just to conclude, here is kind of some suggestions for the way forward. The really important tool, the ESIA, environmental and social impact assessment, could be important tool that would improve this communication between the mining company, the state, and the local people and nomads in particular. So the research of consequences, the thorough research would be really necessary. The access to water and pastures that would be guaranteed. The nomads taken into account. Prior and informed consent would be necessary, as well as monitoring, and then also considering on a wider scale to reserve certain areas for pasture, like in terms of land management plan of the state. So let me conclude with this. Yeah.
This interesting case study, and this completes our panel presentations. We have a few minutes left for the questions from the public. Initially, I thought there will be also opportunity for the panelists to react to one another, but I propose we just join all of this, both the questions from the floor as well as the questions you may have to each other or comments you may have. I see one hand over there, one hand here, so two hands. One is over there, that was the first one that I saw, and then there's two hands here. And three, a lot of discussion. Please present yourself and tell who you are addressing the question to.
Thank you very much. My name is Chris Van Dome from Chatham House. Two quick questions just to link into some of the debates that are happening in Europe at the moment. One, in terms of sustainable development principles, does the panel have anything to say on the debate between the breadth and depth of principles in terms of getting corporate compliance? So even if you look at the top 20 mining companies in the world, only a handful of them are signed up to sustainable development principles and things like the UN guiding principles and so on. So what's your view on making sure that more companies, do we need lax regulation to try and encourage more companies? Or do we need to have tougher regulation and then enforce it to make sure that it's something that they have to abide by? And then perhaps a specific question for Gavin on the ASM. So in a recent, when it was going on, a delegation from the European Union did visit the Matoshi project in DRC. Do you have any comments on that in terms of, was that an example of a best practice of cooperation between companies and ASM? Or was it an example of perhaps kind of abuse of corporate abuse of ASM-. Be interested to hear your thoughts on that. Thank you.
Thank you. If I understand correctly, the first question was to all the panelists. Okay, so I suggest we take 3 more questions, and then I give the floor to the panelists. There's a lady here. She was before you. I'm sorry. I have to keep an order.
Thank you
Yes,
very
go
much.
ahead.
I enjoyed listening to each and every one of the panelists, including the one that was online. So very well done to the organizers for putting together such an informed group of people. I have 2 questions, and they are to Judy. So you put quite a lot of emphasis on community and the impact of mining to communities in the vicinity. And I want to share a perspective with you and see whether you have a view. So, a former head of state in Botswana once said, when asked, why are you not giving priority to the communities and their well-being, he said, and I quote, why should, by sheer coincidence of history and a geological fluke in which a certain group of people just happen to find themselves on top of a mineral, why should they have greater rights than the rest of the community? I don't have a view one way or the other, but it did make me think, actually, these people were not, they didn't erupt from there. They walked from there, from somewhere, and they could have moved on to other places. So I wondered if you have a view. The second question is, it relates to your very provocative statement outright, mining is not sustainable. And in truth, I see what you mean. But I wonder whether your starting point in terms of a thesis is correct. Are you sure it is mining that is not sustainable? Or is it in effect our own industrial trajectory, which puts a burden on natural resources to feed the way we have chosen to live? Is that not what is unsustainable? Are you sure it is mining oil and gas, or is the way we choose to live? That is just the question for you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah. No, just go ahead. Go ahead, and then we move to the gentleman in the back. Yes. Go ahead, please, quickly.
Thank you very much. A very excellent presentations. My question is for Professor Hilson. You mentioned some models, but my question, do those, even the SM people, do they want to be formalized?
Okay, thank you. And now to the gentleman in the back.
Merci. Finalement, toutes les questions vont être adressées au professeur Hilson. Donc, merci aux organisateurs et merci aussi aux panélistes pour les exposés qui se sont déroulés. Donc, ma question s'adresse également au professeur Hilson. Donc, je suis Abdelkader Afan, je viens du Niger et je travaille aussi sur le secteur de l'artisanat minier, notamment les EMAP, donc les petites exploitations minières. Donc, comme il l'a dit, donc au Niger aussi, l'État, dans un élan de recherche des ressources, développement économique du secteur, a procédé avec l'intervention, comme il l'a dit, l'appui de la Banque mondiale, donc à la formalisation du secteur. Mais comme il l'a dit, ça n'a pas été beaucoup facile. Et jusqu'aujourd'hui, l'informel gagne encore du terrain. Et la question que je voudrais poser au professeur, c'est surtout à travers les statistiques. Est-ce que dans les pays où il a travaillé, on a les statistiques, notamment en termes de revenus, de l'apport économique du secteur, mais c'est surtout en termes du tonnage ou de l'exploitation, donc du nombre de tonnes exploitées dans ces pays. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much for your questions. I think now we have to give the floor to the panelists to respond to some, or if it's just a quick question? Yes. Okay, then go ahead, and then we stop with the questions because You need to give some time also to the panelists. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you already for the panelists, for the brilliant panel. So my question will be in French because I will directly address my question to Madame Makani, the director of African Women Mining. Alors, Madame, j'ai une question pour vous. Vous avez parlé tout à l'heure que les activités des femmes dans le secteur minier ne sont pas documentées. Alors, qu'est-ce que African Women in Mining fait pour que ces activités des femmes puissent être documentées? Et ma deuxième question est celle de savoir qu'est-ce que les gouvernements de l'Afrique respective ont mis en place, quelles stratégies ils ont mis en place pour accompagner, n'est-ce pas, les femmes dans le secteur minier, que ce soit les femmes ingénieurs, du top class jusqu'aux mines artisanales. Quel est l'accompagnement que ces gouvernements offrent à ces femmes-là? Merci.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I suggest we move right ahead, starting with you, Professor Hilson, and then Judy, and then at the end, all of the panel. It's
on. The question on the Matoshi project in DRC, to our colleague here who's not looking at me. Yeah. Hi. I don't know if it's an example of a best practice, because what is best practice in ASM? We're sort of cherry picking. And I have my views on fair mining practices in the ASM sector and what we have to adhere to, the OECD due diligence guidance. As far as cobalt is concerned, I'm of the view that mining companies are in, I mean, they're in Congo to mine copper, not cobalt. It's just become a convenient sort of secondary mining activity for them. And it's always been a case of small-scale miners mining cobalt in that part of the world. So it's a best practice, sure, but it sort of has been like this all along, if you see what I'm saying. So, I mean, again, I'll say it, I think the less involved large-scale miners are with small-scale miners. I understand this is a tailings project, but I mean, let's keep things that are supposed to be small-scale mining in the small-scale mining domain. That's what I would say. To our colleague here from Niger, I was looking up that project on the Delve platform, which I'm involved in. And this is a platform aimed at sharing data about ASM. And you ask about statistics related to mine incomes, I believe, and finances. I mean, miners are never going to tell you any of that. I mean, but what you can do is you can take stock of what miners are doing with their money. So a lot of them are spending, it's difficult to pinpoint, but a lot of them are spending money on cars and on alcohol and things that are essential to life, like that. But they're also, at the same time, doing very difficult work to send their children to school, to university, or investing in other businesses and stuff like that. So I think when it comes to data collection and finding out about the things you want to find out about, we need more information on the complete picture. So this is an elaborate way of saying no. But data are coming, and there are a lot of case study analyses I can probably share with you if you want. On formalization, that's a tricky one, because I would say the people who are gatekeeping the informal economy don't want it to be formalized. Why would a chief who's chopping money from local miners want it to be formalized? Not to single out chiefs in Ghana, but anyway, that's what's happening in some countries. But from the miner's point of view, I think it's a case of not force-feeding the miner that you have to become formalized, but putting them in a position to be formalized, and they're not in a position to be formalized. And in theory, why would you be wanting to run away from the police all the time? I mean, some people may want to do that. I don't know, but if you don't have the security of tenure needed to go into a bank and get a loan, or the collateral and security needed to get that technology that's being made available by the World Bank, you can increase your profits. So I would say, from the standpoint of a miner, yes, they would want to be formalized. There's always been this argument that, and I really don't understand it, this argument that miners don't want licenses and to be formalized because they don't want to pay money and don't want to pay taxes. Well, they're paying taxes in the informal economy. They got to pay bribes, they got to pay monies to chiefs and traditional leaders, local government officials. Hope there's no one in the room that are local government officials, chiefs, but anyway, but this is the case, right? So it's, you got to look at what they are exposed to in the informal economy as a result of being in the informal economy versus what they could gain from becoming formalized, if that makes sense.
I have to rush you because we are already eating into the lunchtime. Eating into lunch. Yeah. Chris, on your question, I think anyone who cares a lot about these type of issues and cares about justice issues would want to say, like, get the bar as high as possible, put as much obligations on companies, make sure they act as responsibly as possible. But we know that comes with unintended consequences. And I think at the moment there is, it's fueling this ESG fatigue, right? It's fueling this thing of nothing is ever good enough, it doesn't really make an impact, less and less support for ESG outcomes. And then the second thing that a lot of people in this space is really worried about is the more emphasis there is on supply chain risks, the more it leads to a disincentive to invest in Africa because it is seen as risky. And as soon as your supply chains are geographically spaced in Africa, you have a higher burden. And we're already dealing with this thing where there's this perceived social risk that is unmanageable, and then it becomes an unwanted investment destination. So I think that's the thing that we need to balance. I think the answer, again, this is an ideal or an aspiration, is that local governments or African governments play a much larger role in deciding what makes sense in that context, what's the give and take on that context, and that we're not just standard takers, but standard setters that are more contextual. So that would be my lukewarm answer. Then on your question, the first question I think is so fascinating. I think it's such an interesting debate. The people who live near there, why must they have more of a say if the extractive project is clearly beneficial at a national level? There's a fantastic paper that I would like to point you to by Tia Rio-Francos called Scaling Democracy, where she says this thing about consent to mining, she doesn't really give an answer, but she just says, like, who should make that democratic decision? Should it be the democracy at large or a very, very small group of people? So again, that is not a debate that's necessarily settled, but it is a very interesting question. And I think that firstly, again, it depends on the context. We cannot get away from the fact that the costs of extraction are borne locally. So there should be some differentiated input to local people. And then I think, secondly, a lot of legal frameworks differentiate between indigenous populations and other populations. And I think it is different when your history is so tied to that land and when you've never been anywhere else and there's cultural significance. And I think we have to also treat those types of communities a little bit differently. But I have a lot to say of this. I think it's very interesting, just a theoretical question. Then on your second question, I think, my statement was mining is not sustainable, at least not from an environmental perspective, but it can be as catalyst. I don't think we can get away from the fact that a mine leaves a hole in the ground, clears vegetation, moves people, and often leaves with big piles of waste, some that are toxic. And in Africa, we've got an extremely poor track record. In fact, there is no track record really of rehabilitating mines. We don't really have a lot of good examples where we've tried to really return things the way that they were. So I think our track record is, from an environmental perspective, no, we don't do really well on those sustainability outcomes. If you're going to define sustainability different and say, yes, multi-generationally, yes, there is a cost now, but we're going to make it worth our while, multi-generationally, it's going to start making a difference. I think we have seen that with mining. I think we have seen that multi-generational progress, where over time, if you have jobs that are more dignified and formalized, and people, in South Africa, I think there's so many people who have access to medical care and medical aid and can send their kids to school, and there are bursaries, and I do think that puts that wheel in motion, that makes it a little bit worth our while to make these impacts on the ground. So in that way, if we define sustainability in that way, I do think we can work towards those outcomes.
Yes, merci beaucoup. Par rapport aux questions de documentation, donc je voulais déjà dire que je suis membre de l'association, j'ai été présidente, donc j'ai passé le relais en novembre passé et je suis actuellement directeur d'un think tank, donc c'est deux occupations différentes. Et en ce qui concerne la documentation, nous avons commencé avec des projets. Je pourrais citer le premier projet qu'on a appelé APRI Macquarie Project. C'était un projet de design, c'était un projet de commercialisation d'un bijou qui devrait parler de la résilience des femmes du secteur minier. Et nous avons documenté et nous avons compris qu'il y a beaucoup de talents en Afrique qui peuvent être des designers. Nous avons aussi également compris qu'à part avoir les talents, il est difficile de faire circuler les ressources minérales en Afrique. Parce qu'on avait un problème, on voulait que ce bijou-là soit un bijou panafricain, mais il était difficile de prendre peut-être la chavorie de Kenya, amener l'or du Mali, parce que les lois ne permettaient pas ces échanges-là. Mais il était plus facile de prendre de l'or et de l'amener ici en Europe. Donc ça, on l'a documenté. Le deuxième projet, c'était le projet de la violence basée sur le genre, où on a eu aussi des financements et on a essayé de faire un survey qui nous a donné les informations sur le type de violence basée sur le genre dans le secteur minier en Afrique. On a documenté. Donc, on commence. Ce n'est pas évident, mais avec le temps, je crois que cela sera fait. Et maintenant, en ce qui concerne les gouvernements, qu'est-ce qu'ils font? Comme je l'ai dit dans mon propos, il y a les lois. Les lois sont claires. Le genre est déjà dans les codes miniers. Est-ce qu'ils ne font pas leur travail? Ils vous diront qu'ils font leur travail, puisque même le contenu local est dedans. Mais je crois, pour ma part, que c'est chacun qui doit faire son travail. Eux, ils doivent faire les lois. Les organisations de la société civile doivent plaidoyer pour que les lois soient implémentées, que ce que nous demandons depuis, on a crié pour que ces lois-là soient mises en place. Il faudrait qu'on suive et qu'on évalue. Est-ce que ça marche? Si ça ne marche pas, et qu'on continue le plaidoyer. Donc, je me dis que c'est chacun qui doit faire sa partition. L'État, c'est difficile pour eux la plupart du temps, ils vont vous dire, on a mis les lois, est-ce que ça ne se passe pas? Donc, je crois que le travail revient à d'autres parties prenantes pour que ça s'avance. Merci.
I will be very brief because there was actually no direct question. I just mainly agree with Judy on this general question. But as an anthropologist, I think a lot of attention should be put to the local people, because they are the ones that got struck by this extractive industry, and their way of life and perturbances should be taken seriously. I'm very much into this direction, despite all those layers. Also, the state sometimes is not putting attention enough to the particular livelihoods, but it could. So let me conclude with this. Yes.
Thank you very much. I'm afraid we have already run across the time limit. Lunch is waiting for you. Thank you, the panelists, for very interesting insights into the issue. Challenges are still in front of us, many. The line that I took from what you were saying is that, one, we need more information, more detailed information to know how to base the policies. And the second thing, that in spite of some more media present negative connotation, you all also mentioned that there are already good practices out there and they should be seeing the light of the day more often than they do so far. So thank you very much. Thank you to the audience. I apologize for not being able to give you more room for questions, but as you see, we took more time than it was assigned to us anyway. So thank you.
Trying to establish